Chapter 951. The moment Lin Feng said that. In an instant, the air around the newcomer became colder. Yunhu didn't look happy either. Bojiu felt that this person was hopeless. He couldn't even recognize a wolf. It would be strange if he wasn't taken away. Yunhu glanced over at him. Lin Feng was still chuckling. Come, handsome, sit down and have a drink. This skill of being familiar with others was really inviting a wolf into the house. Bojiu watched as Lin Feng drank another can of beer. Yunhu was sitting beside him. He touched his lips subconsciously, but he didn't even press his lips. Lin Feng was straightforward, slapping his tongue. Handsome, have we met before? With that, Lin Feng frowned again, leaning towards Bojiu seriously. He lowered his voice. Little Spade, don't you think this guy looks like someone? Bojiu replied lazily. A little. She sat back and watched as Lin Feng courted his own death. Burp. Wait a minute, let me think. Lin Feng shook his head, his expression solemn. It wasn't easy for him to make eye contact. His gaze wasn't as blurry as before, but when he met that chiseled and handsome face, he froze. He pulled Bojiu over, turning his head. F***ck. Why is he here? When did he come? How did he find us? This isn't logical. Bojiu took out her phone, smiling faintly as she pressed the record button, gesturing for him to listen carefully. Lin Feng was still in a daze, swaying back and forth before he heard the voice. Where are you? Burp, why should I tell you? You drank? I didn't just drink, I ate meat too. That's right. I saw a hunk. Which hunk? A silver-haired hunk. You don't have to care about this. I'm telling you, I'm not going back today, you can play with yourself. A silver-haired hunk? Why? Can't he have silver hair? He's more handsome than you anyway. There's nothing wrong with that, have fun, do. After listening to this recording, Lin Feng's IQ was finally restored to its previous level. Now that he knew the truth, he was on the verge of tears. He wished he could find a hole to crawl into and bury himself alive. He was the one who said that Yunhu would find his way here. From the moment he entered, Yunhu hadn't said a word. Instead, he swept a glance at the empty wine cans on the ground. There were about a dozen of them. It seemed like he hadn't been drinking recently and had been craving for so much. This made it easier for him to take her away. Who gave you the wine? Yunhu asked. Lin Feng felt that he had to put up a front and let out a drunken burp. Captain gave it to me. You want to pick a fight with the captain? Bojiu face-bombed again. Yet, Yunhu only glanced at him. He sat beside that person, his expression unchanged, but his words were routine. I know, you didn't dare to drink in front of me, but you dared to after coming out. Who said I didn't dare to? Lin Feng opened another can of wine, drinking in a heroic manner. In less than 2 cans, his eyes started to blur again. He probably couldn't recognize anyone, otherwise, he wouldn't be looking at Qin Mo, Little Spade. Come, let's have a pajama party. With that, he leaned towards Qin Mo. Qin Mo blocked him with his left hand, his eyes fixed on Yunhu. Aren't you going to take him away? Yunhu pulled Lin Feng back. You want to have a pajama party? Burp, yes. Lin Feng stood up shakily. Yunhu pulled him towards the door. Let's go home, I'll play with you. Lin Feng didn't even know how Yunhu had shoved him into the car. He was still dizzy. He looked sober, glancing up with a determined expression. I'm not going home. I'm still running away from home. Then, where do you want to go? Yunhu glanced at the road ahead. Lin Feng glanced outside, burping again. To the hotel. No, I can't go to the hotel. I didn't bring my identity card. If Yunhu finds out, he will definitely mock me. Is that so? Yunhu watched a certain someone in a daze. This fellow was still as careless as before, forgetting his wallet when he left home. MMH, Lin Feng replied, burping again. After a while, he asked, why does this road look so familiar? The roads are all the same, of course it looks familiar. Yunhu continued to turn the steering wheel. Lin Feng narrowed his eyes, looking extremely heroic. You're right, where are we going now? To my house. Yunhu's voice was still as calm as before. Don't you want to have a pajama party? Lin Feng nodded. Yes, a pajama party. With that, he frowned. Why does this road look so familiar? I remember now, this is the road to my house. Did he recognize him? At a red light, Yunhu stopped the car, turning his head, meeting a certain someone's hazy eyes. Lin Feng didn't realize how much his face could hurt the people who liked him. Moreover, when he was drunk, it made people want to go over and kiss him. I got it. Lin Feng shook himself, trying to sit up straight. Your house and mine are in the same direction. Handsome, we are really fated. Indeed. Yunhu restarted the car, thinking that he shouldn't have placed too much hope on a certain someone's intelligence. Lin Feng felt a little high. Burp, we have to have another drink. It's fated. Sure. Yunhu drove the car into the courtyard. Lin Feng looked around. Military Base 1, burp, it seems real. When did such a small area appear beside our house? Why didn't I know about it? Yunhu changed the gear, stopped the car, and helped Lin Feng down. No, that's not right, I'm still running away from home. This is Military Base 1, I want to go that way. Lin Feng pointed in the direction of the main entrance. Yunhu helped him forward 3 steps. This is the right way. Do you think I can't tell the direction when I'm drunk? Lin Feng shook his head, trying to sober himself up. I'm telling you, I can still drink another 30 bottles. Let's go back to the room, I'll drink with you, Yunhu said faintly, carrying Lin Feng up. The two of them even had their auras entangled together, even though there were other cars in the courtyard, the headlights couldn't reach them. It was as if the two of them were in another small world. No one would disturb them. The night sky darkened. Fu family's villa. At this moment, Bojio felt that it wasn't a good thing that the naive Lin Feng had left. With Lin Feng around, she would at least be safe. But now, she wasn't so sure. The Almighty's unique minty tobacco scent wafted through the air. Is there something you forgot to do? What? Bojio arched a brow. Help me bathe. Qin Mo inched closer, so close that Bojio stilled. She tilted her head to look into his deep eyes. Her thighs were separated by a layer of cloth, the temperature rising. Her breath became his scent, as though the Almighty's scent was infecting her body. Before Bojio could open her mouth, her words were cut off by a kiss. First, it was a light lick. Once his handsome face was so close, it was easy to lose her ability to think. Qin Mo used this force to carry her up and sit on the sofa. His tongue pushed open her lips and entered her mouth, their tongues intertwining. He didn't give her any chance to regret. Bojio couldn't resist his kiss. The numbness at the tip of her tongue and the melting water kneading made it hard for Bojio to breathe. Until the Almighty released her. Her mind was blank for a few seconds. It was the days after the pleasure. The numbness spread from her tailbone to her entire body as though she had been electrocuted. Her heartbeat was extremely strong. Not to mention the position between her and the Almighty. She was sitting on the Almighty's lap. He could even feel something boiling hot pressing against him. Under such circumstances, she couldn't agree to the bathing. Bojio stood up, her ears flushed. I'll look for Xiaodong, he'll help you bathe. Of course, Qin Mo wouldn't allow Chen Xiaodong to touch him. He glanced at Bojio before glancing at the time, his voice hoarse. Help me bathe after the National League. You can bathe yourself. Qin Mo said the last few words slowly and deeply. Bojio thought, I might not be here after the National League, but she didn't say it out loud. To her, the National League was a dividing line. After they won the National League, the Fu family would be back and everything would be in He Honghua's hands again. When that happened, it would be time for her to leave. She would use her identity to pursue the criminal. She activated the USB. This meant that she would have to return to the darkness. Qin Mo could tell that she wasn't paying attention. He didn't like her expression at this moment. It was as though she didn't care. She could withdraw at any time and end it at any time. Their relationship wasn't the kind that could end at any time. If she couldn't realize this, he would make her realize it. Bo Jiu thought she was safe. Unexpectedly, the moment she entered the room, she was about to bring a pillow to the guest room. The Almighty pushed her against the wall and gave her another round of powerless kisses. Bo Jiu couldn't take it. Her legs were numb and soft. When she regained her senses, she was carried onto the bed. Bo Jiu's bed was a single bed, much narrower than a double bed. This bed was convenient for Qin Mo to a certain extent. The two of them were very close. That handsome face that made her heart race was right in front of her eyes. Qin Mo lowered his lids to look at the person in his arms. Even the scorching breath could stir up one's spirit. Since you don't want to help me, I can help you. With that, Qin Mo carried her again and kicked the bathroom door open. When the shower started, both of their clothes were wet. It was cold water and wasn't warm yet. When it splashed on their bodies, it made them shudder. Qin Mo skillfully removed the cloth strips. As the cloth fell off, the water started to heat up. Everything was different. Bo Jiu was wearing a black t-shirt. Now that it was wet, it was sticking to her body. Qin Mo's eyes darkened at the sight of her curvaceous figure. Without any hesitation, he carried her up and placed her on the counter. His gaze deepened. Qin Mo watched as the clear water droplets slid down the youngster's clean and devilish cheeks. Her wet silver hair fell down and stuck to the side of her ears. The color of her lips was even more alluring. The outline of her waist was smooth and supple. Under the water vapor, there was a bewitching color. The water droplets continued to roll down, landing on the back of Qin Mo's hand. Such a scene was especially ambiguous. It was like a beautiful and oppressive dream, teasing one's heart to the point where it was no longer calm. Bo Jiu went numb and wanted to push him away. But Qin Mo pressed her down, his warm breath hitting the back of her ears. He chuckled. Your breathing is messed up too. It seems like you want me to give you more. The water vapor gathered. Enveloped in the smoky water vapor, Bo Jiu's black t-shirt was crumpled beyond recognition. Qin Mo pushed it to her heart. His thin lips landed, every kiss hot. Bo Jiu trembled. A young lady's body couldn't withstand such teasing. She didn't have any defense against Qin Mo. The water droplets splashed down. Qin Mo didn't turn off the shower. When he stepped on her pants, he arched his waist and barged in. Bo Jiu couldn't withstand that kind of speed. Everything was messed up. It was hot and numb. The water droplets splashed on her body. Her only support was him. And this time, the force was unprecedentedly strong. He nibbled on her ear and pressed his chest against her back. She braced her hands against the wall as if to soften the impact of the blow. But when he stopped, there was hope that he could regain his previous strength. Qin Mo paused, moving closer to the youngster's face. His voice was low. Tell me, why do you want to leave? Bo Jiu frowned slightly. Her snow-white skin was on full display. Especially when the cloth around her chest was undone, she really became a seductive demon. Even the corners of her eyes were tainted with a tenderness that made people want to destroy her. But the stubbornness of biting her lips made her even more irresistible. Qin Mo held her waist, coaxing her. Tell me, who did you learn your hacking skills from? Self-study. Bo Jiu uttered the word, her voice trailing off. Her seductive waist trembled unconsciously. Qin Mo's eyes dimmed. Do you think I'll believe you? Bo Jiu didn't want to continue this topic. She turned her face, smiling seductively. Brother Mo, don't you think it's a waste of time to ask such questions at this time? Or, Brother Mo, are you out of energy? Out of energy? Chin Mo pressed her into his arms, his voice so deep that it was raspy. I'll show you now if I still have the strength. Chapter 952. When Bojio dashed out, her waist and legs were still affected. But after teasing the Almighty, she was still in a good mood. Even when she was eating breakfast, her lips were still in a smile. Chen Xiaodong arranged the things before heading upstairs and knocking on the guest room door. He wondered if Almighty Qin would have a bad temper when he woke up. Madame had passed the task of waking him up to him. He was really scared out of his wits. He knocked 3 times but no one answered. Chen Xiaodong pressed his ear against the door, about to say something. The door behind him opened. Almighty Qin walked out with one hand in his pocket. He seemed to have just showered. He glanced at him, his gaze slow. What's the matter? Chen Xiaodong stilled. He glanced at the guest room he had knocked on and then at the room Almighty Qin had come out from. His mouth was wide open enough to fit an egg. Almighty Qin had just come out from young master's room? At this hour? He had come out from young master's room. There was too much information. Chen Xiaodong could only hold it in. He couldn't say anything. Most importantly, he couldn't let Madame know. This time, young master was completely gay. He Honghua didn't know what was going on. She just felt that her Jiu was sitting there, her lips were a little pink, and her eyes seemed to be open. After a night, she seemed to look much better. Her skin was still white, an indescribable change. Bo Jiu bit on a youtiao. Her waist was slightly sore but with He Honghua around, she couldn't rub it. Fortunately, a phone call came in, allowing her to change her posture. Bo Jiu was delighted when she saw the caller. It was Lin Feng, that naive boy. Hello. The person sitting on the toilet wasn't wearing a shirt, only a pair of SpongeBob SquarePants boxers, exposing his ribs. When he heard the voice coming from the other side of the phone, he grabbed his hair, sounding extremely aggrieved. Little Spade, why didn't you stop Yunhu yesterday? How can you be such a brother? Bo Jiu started to help Lin Feng recall. Last night, you were the one who thought Almighty Yun wasn't bad and insisted on having a drink with him. I never expected you to leave with him so obediently. I was so drunk that I didn't know it was him. Lin Feng was filled with regret. Bo Jiu didn't miss the chance to listen to the live broadcast. What about now? Where are you? What's going on? At the mention of this, Lin Feng felt miserable. Didn't I drink too much last night? You're a man, so you should know that when a man drinks too much, he can't control himself. That's why Almighty Yun finally slept with you, using the scenes mentioned in the novel, Bo Jiu continued, going along with the flow. Lin Feng wanted to jump again. What do you mean he finally slept with me? I should be the one sleeping with him. Speaking up to this point, Lin Feng paused. It's not that exaggerated. He just helped me with something. Bo Jiu took a sip of water. What are you worried about? I'm AF * king straight man. How can I take that? Lin Feng pulled at his hair for a while. Most importantly, I blacked out yesterday. I don't know if I did anything to him after that. He's still lying on the bed and seems to be in pain. If I really did something to him because of alcohol, my conscience wouldn't be able to bear it. Bo Jiu caught onto the main point. You're saying that you drank too much last night and accidentally slept with Almighty Yun? That's right. Lin Feng sighed deeply, concluding, if that really happened, I can't be responsible for him. Bo Jiu wanted to tell him that it wouldn't happen, that he was overestimating his abilities. From front to back, from left to right, he seemed to be the one on the receiving end. You were already so drunk, Almighty Yun should be the one sleeping with you. How could you sleep with Almighty Yun? But Bo Jiu wasn't going to expose him. What do you intend to do now? Bo Jiu asked a practical question. Lin Feng was still sitting on the toilet, his handsome face filled with sorrow. "I'll think about it." He hung up. Lin Feng wanted to smoke to calm himself down. He felt that he had let that fellow down. Because he still had some memories from last night. That was strange. Why did he find that person so handsome? He probably knew that after the competition, he would be leaving the country. He wanted to say something from the bottom of his heart. But for some reason, as he spoke, the feeling changed. It was probably because a man couldn't resist the temptation after drinking. Even now, when he closed his eyes, Lin Feng could hear what the person was saying beside his ear. The scorching hot breath hit the back of his ear. The voice was very low and had a little husky sexiness to it. "Lin Feng, you're hard." Lin Feng didn't want to recall what happened next. Why did he lose control when he was drunk? He could have taken advantage of anyone, but he had to take advantage of Yunhu. With that, Lin Feng glanced at himself. "It's all your fault. Don't you know that no matter how good it is, you can't be gay? You brat." Just as Lin Feng was lecturing himself. Swoosh. The bathroom door was pulled open. Lin Feng braced himself, not daring to look up. Yunhu leaned against the door, his face handsome and calm. He glanced over at a certain someone who had been pulling his hair in the bathroom ever since he woke up. His voice was calm. "How much longer are you going to nag at your little Lin Feng?" Little Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't want to comment on Yunhu's description. He was sad. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have run away from home yesterday. He had to maintain his dignity. Lin Feng coughed, feeling that he didn't have any dignity in his boxer shorts. He could only pretend to be calm. "Leave first." Yunhu felt that his emotions weren't right. After yesterday's sweetness, he understood that he couldn't force him too much. He knew this better than anyone else. Lin Feng might look like that. In reality, he was more straightforward than anyone else. Ever since he was young, he had been thinking about marrying a cute girl. He said that girls had to be doted on and that his wife couldn't be cold or hungry in the future. Hence, even cooking, which didn't fit his persona, was extremely good. Lin Feng had never known. When he heard those things, he didn't know how his heart worked. He wanted to let him get what he wanted. After all, this guy deserved to be treated gently. But he was jealous from the bottom of his heart. He was jealous of the girl who would get him in the future. He was so jealous that he didn't dare to voice his thoughts. If it hadn't been for Little Spade, this guy might never have been enlightened. With a couple by his side, he realized that he really liked him. It had never been brotherly love. Chapter 953. With that in mind, Yunhu's entire being became indescribably gloomy. His heart felt as though it had been stabbed. Regardless of how strong he appeared in front of that person, when he sat like this, he still felt a sense of despair. Bang! Lin Feng had probably made up his mind. He rushed out of the washroom. Originally, he wanted to tell him in one go that he really couldn't be gay and that they could be brothers again. But when he saw that person sitting there with a pale side profile, he couldn't say the words that were at the tip of his tongue. After all, Yunhu really looked as though he had done something to him. He looked a little pitiful. He had never seen such an expression on his face before. Come to think of it, it made sense. Even if Yunhu was gay, he should be the one on top. He could just treat him as a straight man. It probably wouldn't be easy for him to accept being defiled by him. When Yunhu heard the commotion, he glanced over. He had already recovered his usual calm demeanor, that gaze emotionless. But Lin Feng felt that there was a lot of meaning behind that gaze. In addition, Yunhu's current position. He seemed to have been rubbing his waist since just now. Even though Lin Feng was a newbie, he was a newbie who had seen porn. Every person who had been F** had probably looked like Yunhu now, his waist uncomfortable and different from usual. So last night, he really did something to Yunhu? Lin Feng inhaled deeply, looking at himself and then at Yunhu, his face solemn. Don't worry, I will take responsibility. Take responsibility? Yun-Hu was stunned by the sudden change. He didn't think that he had to take responsibility for helping him to masturbate, or, did this guy misunderstand something again? Lin Feng sat down. His posture was a little chinibu. Luckily, his face was handsome. Although I was so impulsive because I was drunk, what I did is what I did. I will take responsibility for you. However, you have to give me a process. After all, I'm straight. I really don't understand what you gays are thinking, but I still have to take responsibility. Did it? Yun-Hu grasped the crux of the problem. Lin Feng pointed at his waist. His face was a little red. It's that. Are you okay now? Do you need me to go down and buy some medicine? It should be your first time down there, right? Is it still painful? If it hurts, don't hold it in. Tell me. It seemed like this idiot had forgotten that he had sprained his waist last night when he was struggling to go home. Yun-Hu didn't know who had given him the wrong impression that he had slept with him. But Yun-Hu didn't intend to explain clearly. He didn't admit or deny it. Instead, his gaze deepened. To be honest, he still didn't understand the direction of a certain person's thoughts. When Lin Feng saw Yun-Hu turn his head away, he knew that Yun-Hu didn't want to talk to him. That's right, which man would still be in a good mood after being f***ed? If it was him. He had to beat him to death. Other than the fact that Huzi had ignored him when they were young. Today was the first time he didn't speak at all. Lin Feng was a little flustered. He pondered for a moment and said, "Wait, I'll go make another call." "Did you go to the toilet?" Yun-Hu glanced up, his voice slow. "Dressed like this?" Lin Feng lowered his head. It was indeed inappropriate. He looked at the clothes on the ground. They were already wrinkled and couldn't be worn at all. How intense had they been yesterday? The clothes were thrown on the ground. Lin Feng covered his eyes. Yun-Hu didn't need to look at him to know what he was thinking. It seemed like this guy had even forgotten that he had taken off his clothes, waved them in his hands, and thrown them on the ground casually. "I'm dressed." Lin Feng casually put on a pair of pants and said to Yun-Hu, "Wait for me." Yun-Hu reached out and grabbed his wrist. "Are you going to call Little Spade again? Tell me directly if you have anything. Why are you always calling Little Spade? Isn't he experienced? I wanted to ask how to deal with it, but you ignored me." Lin Feng grabbed his hair. Yun-Hu glanced at him. "Go ahead." Lin Feng flew into the washroom like a sparrow freed from its shackles. He called Little Spade and explained the situation before asking, "Do you think I should be more concerned about him? After all, it's his first time being f***ed. He probably can't accept it psychologically." Bojo didn't reply because the Almighty, who was sitting in front of her, took his phone over and showed her his screen. It was a message from Yun-Hu to the Almighty. There was only one line. "Regardless of what Lin Feng says, get Little Spade to agree." He was so scheming. Did Lin Feng know that he was naive? Bojo asked lazily, "Where are you now?" "In the washroom." Lin Feng glanced at the ceiling. "Do you understand how I feel? As though I've suddenly become a father?" Bojo thought to herself, "I've always been trying my best to be the Almighty's sugar daddy. What does a new father like you understand? Why are you always in the washroom?" "I'm not afraid of Yun-Hu hearing me." Lin Feng sighed. "You don't understand how complicated my feelings are. You are the one who doesn't understand. Almighty Yun can predict everything you say. Is there a need to listen? This naive girl, if you think you can turn gay for Almighty Yun, go ahead. If you can't, we're all adults and you don't have to be responsible for sleeping with him. In the end, it all depends on your heart. There are some things that can't be forced. It's best not to force yourself." Bojo's words were honest. It was because she treated them as friends. A relationship born from a misunderstanding wouldn't last long. Because she cared, the hurt would only deepen. But if Lin Feng was willing, the misunderstanding would be a beautiful one, but it was obvious that Chin Mo didn't like hearing her words. The feeling that this person was indifferent to everything came back again. It seemed as though even if he wanted her, it didn't mean that he had her. Chin Mo's heart tightened unconsciously, and even his gaze deepened. He had never been anyone's boyfriend. He wouldn't be. But this person seemed to have never treated him as a boyfriend. With that, Chin Mo reached out and lifted the youngster's chin. He leaned over and kissed her lips. Chen Xiaodong, who was standing at the side, thought. He hadn't expected to witness such a scene. It had happened without any warning. This was the Fu family's house. What if Madame saw? Bo Jiao was startled when she felt a slight chill on her lips. Chapter 954. Bo Jiao hadn't expected the Almighty to kiss her all of a sudden. She was still holding the phone in her hand, her clean and fair face paused for a moment. She even forgot what she wanted to say. She could only look at the handsome face in front of her. When the kiss ended, her lips were brushed by his, and it was cold and ticklish. After Yun sent the WeChat message, he stuffed his phone into his pocket. When he saw him come out, he pretended to be uneasy and said, "You don't have to take responsibility, we are both guys. It's normal to sleep for a night. It's good enough that you didn't despise me." If Yun hadn't said that, Lin Feng wouldn't have felt sorry for him. Especially when he tilted his head, which made him look slightly fragile. "Are you sure it's fragile?" Chin Mo looked at the person in front of him who was holding her phone in a daze. Because she had just woken up, her silver hair was still fluffy. She looked like a little tiger that wanted to be pampered. He couldn't help but lift his thin lips and lean over to kiss the corner of her lips. Chen Xiaodong. "Mommy, I really don't want to see two guys kissing in front of me. I'm a straight guy, I'm gay." In Almighty Chin's eyes, didn't he, a third wheel, exist? Obviously not. Sometimes, kissing was a way to declare his ownership. It wasn't just to let others know, it was also to let Bo Jiao know that she wasn't a big deal. Bo Jiao blinked. The Almighty's gaze seemed to be deep. He seemed to like her, but at the same time, it seemed like he wanted to stuff her into the bin. Hey, little spade. Hey. Why aren't you saying anything? Is there no signal? On the other end of the line, Lin Feng glanced at his phone, assuming that the washroom was blocking his communication with his brother. "Forget it, I've decided. I'm going to lay my cards on the table." Lin Feng put away his phone and pulled open the wooden door of the bathroom. Lin Feng's gaze was heavy. "I have to take responsibility." Yun watched as a certain someone took the bait, looking valiant and high-spirited. He asked the most practical question. "How do you intend to take responsibility?" "Marry you." Lin Feng added, "I'll try my best to marry you." Oh. Yun didn't know what to say. This guy was still a straight guy. He wanted to marry her after sleeping with her. "You should know how I feel about you." Yun followed his train of thought and said, "I won't agree to the arranged marriage and marriage of convenience in novels." Lin Feng thought to himself, "Of course I know what you mean. If you dare to bring up the matter of hitting me, I will cripple you right now." However, he had just slept with her, so he had to be gentle. "Speak." Yun replied faintly, "I want to kiss you the moment I see you, so let's start with kissing." Kiss? Lin Feng's eyes widened. This wasn't within his scope of consideration at all. Yun was a two-faced person. "You weren't this excited when you hugged me yesterday." She hugged him and vomited, not daring to let go. Helplessly, when Lin Feng heard that, his mind automatically started to play some small scenes. His face turned red, and he felt very uneasy. "All right." Yun arched a brow. "What's good about it? Let's start with kissing." Lin Feng leaned over like a man, putting on an expression as if he was a paper tiger. Yun replied leisurely, "Are you going to do it or should I?" "Of course, I'll do it, I'll be the attacker." Lin Feng was very firm on this point. When Yun heard the words "I'll be the attacker," his expression didn't change, he just arched a brow, his gaze deep as he looked at the person he could finally have. Even if it was an illusion, Lin Feng leaned over a little, and then a little more. When he was almost there, he felt an inexplicable heat in his ears. He glanced at that person, and after a moment, he said, "Close your eyes." "Do I need to close my eyes?" Yunhu arched a brow, thinking about this fellow's kissing experience. "Do you close your eyes when kissing your ex-girlfriend?" Lin Feng recalled the last time he scared this fellow, his gaze fluttering. "Of course. Don't people close their eyes when kissing on TV?" "All right." There was a hint of unwillingness in Yunhu's voice. He wasn't willing because if only his first kiss had been his as well. Lin Feng leaned forward again, but this time, his ears felt even hotter. Why was Yunhu still so strong even with his eyes closed? It must be because this fellow was too handsome. Lin Feng looked at the tall nose that was inches away from him. In the past, he had always been envious of Yunhu's looks. He was the kind of man who had good looks and wasn't feminine at all, unlike him, who was naturally tender. When they were close enough, Lin Feng's gaze swept towards Yunhu's lips. For some reason, his heart started racing, and he felt a little uncomfortable. Thinking about it carefully, who would kiss their brother of more than 20 years? Even when they fooled around, it wasn't like this. After all, they were both men. Lin Feng took a deep breath and said, "Can I kiss your face?" Yunhu opened his eyes, watching Lin Feng's expression. Even though he had concealed his emotions, this fellow had never been an expert in terms of emotions. The slightest bit of unwillingness could be seen. Yunhu's heart sank, and he asked, "Is it difficult to kiss?" I really can't kiss you." Lin Feng hadn't finished the word go. His thin lips were blocked. Yunhu liked to drink tea, and when he kissed, it was filled with his unique tea fragrance. There was also an indescribable feeling. Lin Feng froze on the spot, his eyes wide open. Yunhu took the opportunity to pry open his lips, the tip of his tongue hooking upwards, not giving him a chance to catch his breath. How could a naive person like Lin Feng be Yunhu's match in this aspect? Just as he was about to speak, Yunhu's kiss wrapped around him. The feeling of the tip of his tongue being sucked made him shudder. There was nothing left in his head, only a blank space. Lin Feng reached out, pushing him away. The back of his hand subconsciously rubbed his thin lips, the burning feeling still lingering. Yunhu, who was pushed away, sat up straight, glanced at him, his fingers brushing across his bitten lips. Lin Feng wanted to explain. After all, Yunhu had tried his best just now. It was hard for him to accept it psychologically. Unexpectedly, Yunhu spoke faster than him. "It's nothing. If you can't accept it now, take it slow. One day you will be able to accept it." With that, he stood up, the fringe on his forehead blocking his eyes. "I'm going to take a shower." Lin Feng opened his mouth, but in the end, he didn't say anything. He sat on the bed and grabbed his hair. The shower was turned on. Yunhu stood below, the water droplets sliding down his straight back. That sentence wasn't meant for Lin Feng, it was better to say it to himself. He liked someone for too long. It was so long that he was afraid he would marry someone else one day. But with his grand appearance, he would have to miss it, at the Fu family's house. Bojiu was still trying to guess what the Almighty was thinking. Qin Mo glanced at the time on his wrist, saying faintly, "Let's go after eating, we're going to meet the advertiser." Advertiser? Bojiu arched a brow. "I have to meet him too." Qin Mo's side profile was very attractive. "Isn't it good to let you earn some pocket money by filming advertisements?" "That's not bad, it proves that I rely on my looks to make a living." Bojiu smiled, her love for money was well known. Qin Mo watched as the youngster's eyes fell on the money. He didn't want to admit that he had fallen for her, to the point of being hopeless. If she wanted money, wouldn't it be better for him to be her boyfriend? He had never seen such an idiot before. Qin Mo lowered his gaze, glancing at the display on his phone. It was Feng Yi, the car had arrived, 10 p.m. In the advertising studio. Due to the large amount of investors, there were many celebrities in the studio. Lee Si-hwa and his manager, who had tried to embarrass Bo-jio at the gathering 2 days ago, were among them. These 2 days, Lee Si-hwa's popularity had soared. A popular youth idol drama had helped him gain a lot of fans. But that wasn't the reason for the rise in popularity. The real reason why his value had skyrocketed was because he had appeared on the casting list of an international director, William. Everyone knew that anyone who could show their face in such a blockbuster would have a different meaning in the industry. But Lee Si-hwa was difficult to negotiate with. The advertiser had already given him a persona. They felt that it wasn't outstanding enough and insisted on 2 more scenes. This advertisement was different from the others. The Chinese director had wanted to film a microfilm advertisement. After all, he was in the electronics industry. But he was just a pretty face, no one would believe him if he claimed to have acted before. He felt that adding 2 more scenes would ruin the beauty. Both parties couldn't hold on. Lee Si-hwa looked as though he was the big shot, and if they didn't please him, he wouldn't be able to negotiate. The Chinese director had a unique personality, placing the camera over, a smile on her lips as she answered the call. "Teacher? Are you coming over? It would be great if you could come over, you can help me control the scene." After she hung up, the big shot, who had been spoiled by his fans, was still wearing his sunglasses, looking high and mighty. The Chinese director thought to herself, the rumored fresh meat had good looks and acting skills. He even respected the staff. That must be bullsh*t, our condition is still the same, our Si-hwa's face can't be flashed across the screen. The manager had her considerations, after all, the status of the artiste under her was different now, she had to have some demands. The Chinese director couldn't convince them and was about to walk over to say something. Just then, a voice came from the other side. "He's so handsome. Why are young Master Chin and Big Spade here? I can't believe it, oh my god, I'm satisfied." Big Spade? A professionally sports player, the silver-haired handsome youngster. I thought he was cosplaying, how could he be so handsome in real life? The discussion heated up as the 2 of them walked in. Even the Chinese director looked over curiously. He wouldn't have known if he didn't look, but his eyes lit up the moment he saw it. This was exactly the kind of character that she wanted the most. A laptop advertisement. The theme was mysterious and beautiful. What she wanted to do was to tell a short story with a visual sense. Hence, she had asked the manufacturer to find a couple for her. Even if they weren't a couple, they had to be young and handsome. Handsome didn't have to be rigid, it had to have a unique charm, and it would be best if they weren't bad at computer games. Now, looking at the 2 of them, the Chinese director only had one thought. It didn't matter if they didn't know how to computer games, as long as they could pose properly, reveal their faces, and add a little expression, it would be perfect. "Who are they?" The Chinese director had just returned from overseas, pulling a staff over to ask. The staff had an incredulous expression. "Young Master Chin and Spade Z, they are the professionally sports players who replaced the previous couple. The advertiser got them from their manager, but they only agreed to show their faces. They just arrived." The Chinese director's heart blossomed when she heard the staff's words. She had to make the best use of the actors. Arrange for their makeup and clothes. Makeup was fine, but Chin Mo wouldn't allow anyone to touch her. Fortunately, they were in a filming studio and the environment wasn't bad. Bo-jio took the clothes from the staff and smiled faintly. "Thank you, I can do it myself." The staff didn't know how to play games and didn't watch esports competitions. But when she saw the youngster's handsome face and thanked her, she couldn't help blushing. She finally understood why so many people were infatuated with this youngster. Even though he was in the esports industry, his popularity was high. He was really handsome. He wasn't just handsome, his gaze was gentle as well. There were many handsome men and beautiful women in the esports industry. But there weren't many people like this youngster who exuded an aura as pure as jade. From afar, Lee Si-hwa narrowed his eyes, his face darkening. Why is that useless Fu family here? The manager wasn't sure either. I'll go ask. It's fine. Sihua's expression darkened. With young Master Qin by his side, it wouldn't be strange for him to go anywhere. Go ask the director when they are filming. All right. The manager didn't want to provoke young Master Qin since they couldn't wait to fawn over him. Sihua was still looking at the staff. Why would she give the clothes to that useless person? Was he here to film an advertisement? Sihua's eyes dimmed. The staff was still standing outside the changing room. There were 2 changing rooms. Bojiu went to one while Qin Mo went to the other. The staff paced back and forth, hoping to catch a glimpse of the youngster after she changed her clothes. After about 3 minutes, Bojiu walked out. Actually, this was what she usually wore when she was at the Fifth Avenue. He was wearing a white shirt, a black trench coat, a long tie, and a pure black mask on his face. This was to reduce his presence. Unexpectedly, the clothes for the advertisement were the same. Bojiu arched a brow, reaching out to loosen her tie. The Chinese director and the staff were dazzled by her handsomeness. Chapter 955. The Chinese director's eyes lit up. She couldn't wait to get the cameraman to start the shoot. This was the male lead in her heart. How could someone be so perfect? Even with the mask, it couldn't hide the superstar aura he exuded. When the Chinese director had first seen the youngster, she had felt that he looked too clean and pure. Perhaps, he wouldn't be able to bring out the mysterious effect. Unexpectedly, as compared to the previous set of clothes, the black trench coat and mask were more suitable for him. The moment Bojiu came out, she was stared at by the 2 girls. Usually, she had a strong tolerance, but today, she was being stared at for a long time. She paused for a moment before asking, "May I ask, what kind of advertisement are we shooting?" The stage supervisor snapped back to her senses and was about to speak. Qin Mo pushed the door open and walked out, silencing the entire set once more. Some people, regardless of what they wore, would be able to bring out their unique aura. Noble, indifferent, porcelain white skin. This was everyone's first impression of Qin Mo. At this moment, Qin Mo was wearing a white shirt, holding a can of beer in his hand. His collar was half open. He had wet his hair for the styling. Black strands of hair scattered across his forehead, water droplets sliding down the bridge of his nose. He looked casual and sexy. So handsome. Someone sucked in a sharp breath. Bojiu turned, looking at the person. She was met with a pair of deep eyes. The moment Qin Mo saw her, the color of his eyes deepened. They were separated by half the studio, one in the light and the other in the dark. Bojiu was still wearing the mask. In that instant, her heart skipped a beat. It was because she suddenly remembered something. The Almighty had seen her at Fifth Avenue. Even though it had just been a brush. But back then, she had been wearing a black trench coat with a hood and a black mask. Other than the color of her hair, she had looked exactly the same as now. Bojiu wasn't sure if the Almighty would remember the time they had brushed shoulders when he saw her in this state. For some reason, she felt a little guilty. She tilted her head and prayed in her heart, "Don't remember, don't remember." Just as she was thinking about this, a person appeared in front of her. That person enveloped her on the spot. It could be said that she bumped into that person's arms. When the tip of his nose touched the white shirt, he let out a long sigh. Just like this, it didn't seem like he didn't recognize him at all. "You don't even know how to walk?" A melodious voice sounded from above. Bojiu glanced up and touched the bridge of her nose. Qin Mo studied the youngster's face, especially when his gaze swept over her masked face. His voice was faint, a little nonchalant. "In the past, when I went to America to play, I bumped into someone who looked like you." Bojiu's left hand, which was in her pocket, paused. When she smiled, her eyes were sincere. "I'm so handsome, how can there be someone like me?" I really want to meet him. Z. When she heard the codename, Bojo tilted her head. Through the mask, she asked, "What?" The person I bumped into in America was Z. Chin Mo's side profile remained emotionless. Bojo paused, widening her eyes. With the mask on, she looked extremely innocent. "Brother Amo, you mean that I look like Z?" Chin Mo's thin lips lifted. He paused and leaned forward, whispering into her ear, "It's a pity that you aren't an actor." Bojo's heart sank, but the corners of her eyes lifted. She looked mischievous. "It's indeed a waste of my good looks if I don't act. In such a public event. There would definitely be many people looking over." Bojo could hear the commotion around her, but it probably wouldn't affect the Almighty much. But for the sake of Feng Yi, she had to remind the Almighty, "Brother Mo, this is a filming studio." She meant for him to restrain himself. Otherwise, Manager Feng would have to go out to drink and explain. It would be rather pitiful. With that, Chin Mo pinched Bojo's chin. He didn't kiss her, but that position wasn't any different from a kiss. "It seems like we have to talk again tonight." Because of Chin Mo's domineering action. The Chinese director was inspired again. His eyes were as bright as the headlights of a car. Bojo had no choice but to push him away. "Brother Mo, there's someone else." At this moment, Manager Feng was almost in tears. "Little Spade, it wasn't a waste for me to dote on you. When young Master Chin was showing off his love, you even helped me hold him back. Come, come, come." Feng Yi pulled Bojo's arm decisively, moving her to the side. When he did this, he braced himself to do it. It was mainly because of the coldness emanating from Chin Mo's eyes. His presence was too strong. He really didn't know how Little Spade could withstand such a strong aura. At the end of the day, Little Spade was thick-skinned. The Chinese director was in the best mood. "I suddenly have a good idea. Hurry, set up the scene at the side." Yi Sihua, who had been neglected, was now as dark as the clouds in the sky. After all, he was a popular movie star. What was wrong with this director? Did he really think that a gamer would be more popular than him? Yi Sihua had to admit that things would be different with young Master Chin's participation. Hence, even if it was a commercial, it would be a commercial for him and young Master Chin. That useless Fu family would only bring down his standards. Besides, even if he could play the piano, he wouldn't be presentable. Filming a commercial wasn't easy. It was about not being stiff, being able to look at the camera and having some acting skills. Did that useless thing? "We are in a rush to finish the film. Everyone, hurry up," the Chinese director said as he glanced at Yi Sihua, who was still seated in the corner. Yi Sihua wasn't stupid, he knew it wouldn't be good for either of them if it dragged on. He stood up and spoke to his manager. The manager nodded and walked towards Feng Yi. Coincidentally, the Chinese director was there too. The manager's attitude was different now. He smiled and said, "If we knew that young Master Chin would be appearing in the commercial, our Sihua would have agreed long ago. It seems like it's fate." "Director Lee, when can we start filming?" Even though the Chinese director had just returned from overseas, he was still in the same industry. One look at his manager was enough to tell what kind of person he was. She picked up the script she had written for the scene, her tone calm. "Change your clothes and read the script." Yi Sihua watched from the side. Didn't this little director know that the industry was small? With such an attitude, didn't he know that the industry was small? The manager knew that Yi Sihua wasn't in a good mood. When she walked back, she whispered something in Yi Sihua's ear, reminding him to restrain himself with young Master Chin around. "Of course I know, don't worry." Yi Sihua licked his lips, his eyes dimming. "I'll deal with this director in the future. As for the person who gave up gaming and insisted on filming a commercial, I'll let him know the difference between us." The manager was still worried. "He came with young Master Chin, I won't do anything on the surface." Yi Sihua laughed sinisterly. "Don't forget, this commercial has a storyline and there are 3 main characters. Since he is so desperate to prove himself, I'll let him know that it isn't easy to be a main character. The manager's eyes widened. You mean to suppress the scene? Suppressing the scene was a term used in the industry. In the beginning, when experienced actors with good acting skills wanted to teach some fresh meat a lesson, they would occasionally use this trick. After all, there were some who didn't even fulfill their role as an actor. They didn't memorize their lines and went around taking part in variety shows, dragging down the production. In the end, some of the more scheming celebrities used suppressing the scene to plot against each other. Especially when two people with similar reputations were together. In order to enhance their image, they would use suppressing the scene. But the manager hadn't expected Lee Si-hwa to use such a tactic on someone who had never acted before. Why? You don't like it? Lee Si-hwa glanced at him, his words going straight to the point. Don't forget, there are 3 people in this commercial. The best way to make everyone think I'm the spokesperson is to stand out. The manager nodded in agreement, giving him a thumbs up. On the other side, Bo-jio was already seated in the makeup room, her lids lowered as she flipped through the script she had written on the spot. At the same time, she was trying to think of a way to escape the conversation with the Almighty. The makeup artist was having a hard time with her. Her eyelashes were black and long, there wasn't a need for makeup. She could use some eyeliner to enhance the depth of her features. That would be more in line with the character in the script. But as for the rest, the makeup artist caressed her smooth and fair face, praising sincerely. Your skin is so good, you don't need to put on foundation. If too many things were applied to this face, it would ruin its original handsomeness. Now that he had brought out a spy, he really looked like the main character of a Korean drama. The Chinese director was getting impatient, asking Bo-jio, have you found the feeling? When Bo-jio received the script, she didn't know what to say. It was about a hacker. She didn't need to find the feeling. The Chinese director noticed the youngster's silence, assuming that he was nervous because he hadn't been in this industry before. Hence, he softened his tone. Don't worry, just act naturally. Even if you can't find the feeling, your face is more than enough. Come, stand back a little. The Chinese director walked to the side, making space for everyone. He raised the loudspeaker, his eyes bright as he shouted, everyone, get ready. First scene, action. Swoosh. The lights in the studio were all dimmed. It was the layout of a billiard hall. The light that shone down was a little dim. However, the slender figure standing beside the billiard table wasn't dim at all. That wasn't all. When the light shone down, it seemed as though he was tall and slender. He stood there casually with a laptop in front of him. He seemed to be a little bored. He hooked his index finger, opened the can, and for some reason, the corner of his mouth curled up. The girls were going crazy as they watched from the side. I finally understand why everyone says that young Master Chin is the prettiest in Jiang City. He's so handsome, I'm so envious of young Master Chin's future girlfriend, she can look at his face every day. And his figure, young Master Chin is a walking clothes rack. I can't take it anymore, my nose is going to bleed. The girls said that because just as Chin Mo was about to raise his head to take a sip of the ice-cold beer, his eyes seemed to have seen something. He turned towards the door. The camera panned in that direction as well. A young man in a black trench coat walked in from the door. He was probably in the middle of a run. As he was a little thin, he wore a black mask, which made his eyes look very black and bright. His entire person seemed to have been drawn with a line pen. The black and white were distinct, and in an instant, he caught the entire camera. At this moment, Lee Si-hwa was there too. He was also one of them, playing with a black tablet in his hands. His eyes were fixed on the youngster who was walking over. He had wanted to portray an indifferent person, but to add to his acting, Lee Si-hwa stood in front of Bo-jio, his voice cold and aloof. I heard your skills aren't bad, want to play a game? It was a last-minute change of script, but since the scene wasn't too bad, the Chinese director didn't ask for a pause. The moment she had seen Bo-jio, she had probably forgotten that he wasn't an actor and had only wanted to continue filming. Bojo was still wearing the black mask, her hands stuffed into the pockets of her trench coat. She didn't even glance at Yi Sihua, replying through the mask, "I'm not interested." The Chinese director felt that the youngster's performance was perfect. The youngster's performance was more in line with the character she wanted to portray, bringing the character to life. Yi Sihua would never have expected the trash to perform so well in front of the camera. Initially, he had wanted to use his impromptu acting skills to silence the youngster. It would be best if there were more NGs. But now, because of the youngster's reply, the camera swept past him, focusing on the youngster. Anyone who knew how to act would know that Yi Sihua was the one who was being suppressed, and it was a harsh suppression. But Bojo couldn't be blamed. She hadn't been interested in this person. Besides, he had changed his script at the last minute. Everything Bojo did was a natural reaction. After all, she knew that the person she was facing was the Almighty, who was standing at the side of the billiards hall. In the camera, the youngster had already passed Yi Sihua, placing the thin laptop on the table and starting to type. Bojo's typing speed had always been fast. Chapter 956. How could there be someone who could move so quickly? Also, the innate sense of being in the camera. Every single detail shocked everyone in the photography team. It was just an advertisement, but it made them want to continue watching. It wasn't just because of the storyline, but also because of the strange tension between the youngster and young Master Qin. The Chinese director didn't forget his mission in the midst of his shock, shifting the camera to the youngster's notebook. There was a huge close-up, especially the bright silver logo, which matched the youngster's hair color. The shot took 3 seconds. The next second, the scene changed. Someone reached out to support the youngster's side across the billiard table. His slender figure lowered, his nose bridge high, his lips thin and his eyes dark. He looked like a flirt. But he didn't even glance at the back of the beauties around him. Instead, he stared at the youngster, his sexy lips lifting into a faint smile. That person wasn't anyone else, it was Qin Mo. Bojo glanced up, their gazes meeting. In that instant, the cover of the notebook was extremely clear. The tension between the two of them became even more obvious. Even though there was hostility in their eyes, when their faces came close, there was an extra hint of ambiguity that made it hard for people to look away. Were they really not a couple? This was the thought in everyone's mind. Some were impressed by the director for coming up with such a scene. This advertisement would definitely be popular. Just based on this scene, no one would ignore the notebook between the two of them. Yi Sihua had an extra second of footage, but his gaze wasn't on him. Instead, after Qin Mo spoke, everyone's gaze was focused on him. "Who are you?" That was Qin Mo's line. It was a short 3 words, but because of his actions and the way he looked at the youngster's thin lips, it was extremely alluring. Bojo stood up, walking past the billiard table and picking up a cue stick. When the youngster was doing this, she lifted her trench coat and removed it with one hand. Then she picked up the cue stick and lowered her body, aiming it at the colored ball on the table. A loud swoosh. The colored ball bypassed the half-opened silver notebook and landed in the middle of the net. Just the sound alone was enough to tell that it was a beautiful shot. At this moment, there was an uproar in the studio. Worried that it would affect the filming, everyone covered their mouths as they turned towards her. He was too handsome. The Chinese director felt a little dizzy from the shock again. He quickly moved the camera to capture the scene. When the youth was playing, his shirt was pulled up, revealing a fair jade-like skin. That curve was astonishingly beautiful. Qin Mo's gaze seemed to have stopped there as well. It was dark and deep to the extreme. The youngster retracted her cue and picked up her coat from the billiard table. She casually draped it over her shoulder and smiled devilishly. "Why should I tell you?" What followed was the young man's carefree back view. Qin Mo stood there, looking at the back view like a devil. He pressed his fingers on the notebook and closed it gently. His thin lips curved slightly and he laughed playfully. Heh. Finally, the screen stopped at the notebook. Apart from the notebook's logo, there was only a line of words, unfinished, to be continued, Kacha. It signaled the end of the shoot. The Chinese director was the first to stand up and clap. The others couldn't hold it in any longer. Previously, they had been afraid to disturb the two of them, but now, everyone stood up and let out a heartfelt exclamation. After all, even a professional actor wouldn't be able to complete the shoot in one take. More importantly, filming this commercial didn't just require the other party to type fast, the scene just now was also a test of their skills. The photography team had originally wanted to use these things for post-production. Who would have expected that Spadesy didn't just do it? He was so handsome that he could turn the commercial into a movie. This wasn't something that could be done easily. The atmosphere in the studio was unprecedentedly intense. When Bojio walked back, the crew were all looking at her like a fangirl. As for Lee Si-hwa's whereabouts, no one cared anymore. His face was completely sunken. He wanted to flare up, but he didn't dare. He could only suppress his anger. He didn't want to watch the commercial anymore. He didn't even need to watch it to know that the scene just now had been a deliberate attempt by that useless person to humiliate him. Lee Si-hwa's popularity had been suppressed. Of course, he wasn't in a good mood. He threw his jacket aside and left with his manager. When he left, his mood wasn't quite right. Of course, the staff in the studio could see it. But so what? Anyone who saw the scene just now would know that Lee Si-hwa was up to no good. A professional actor was bullying someone who had never acted before. In the end, he had been suppressed. It was an awkward slap to his face. Lee Si-hwa was still hoping that someone in the studio would ask him to stay. After he walked out, he asked his manager, "Did anyone follow me?" His manager shook his head in embarrassment. Lee Si-hwa raised his leg and kicked the bin beside him. "What is that?" His manager hurriedly consoled him. "It's just a commercial and the director is a newcomer. Even if young Master Chin is around, it won't have much commercial value. You are one of the candidates that Director William admires, this is nothing." After hearing his consolation, Lee Si-hwa's anger subsided a little. "Go and find out where the director is from. He's so disrespectful, he might as well stop filming." "I know what you mean, I'll ask him now." As the agent spoke, she turned on her cell phone and dialed a familiar number. "Reporter Lee? Listen to what you're saying, I don't have anything to reveal to you. However, there's someone I want to ask about, for this shoot." After hearing the manager's words, the person on the other end of the line replied faintly. The manager's expression changed completely. Lee Si-hwa couldn't hear the conversation and could only look at his face. He frowned impatiently. What did he say? Where did the director come from? The agent's hand that was holding the phone slowly lowered as he muttered, "Director William." Lee Si-hwa replied, "I'm asking you where the director came from, why are you mentioning Director William?" The manager's face was pale. He glanced up at Lee Si-hwa. "She followed Director William back to China, she is his only disciple." Instantly, Lee Si-hwa's expression changed, even his lips stiffened. He wanted to go back, but there was no way for him to do so. After all, he had left in a fit of anger, it would only embarrass him if he went back. But how did the director become Director William's disciple? Lee Si-hwa was about to go crazy, anger and embarrassment surging through him. The manager was afraid he would do something else, hence, he pulled him into the nanny van. The manager knew that this wasn't just a commercial they had lost, they were afraid of losing even more. The atmosphere in the studio remained the same. No one noticed that in an inconspicuous corner, a foreigner had been watching for a long time. A foreigner had been sitting there watching for a long time. Beside him was an assistant. Ever since the cameras had started, he had been sitting there, his gaze following Bojio's every movement. At this moment, he only had one thought in his mind. Even if this person had a bad reputation, the young hacker in his movie had to be played by him. Did you see the expression on the youngster's face when he was typing and playing the ball? He is the person we are looking for. Old William couldn't be blamed for his agitation, He had seen many profiles, but none of them were as stunning as the youngster every time they met. He fits the role perfectly, be it in terms of looks or personality, he is perfect. He has to be the one, he has to be the one. When old William reached the end of his sentence, he could not help but stand up. Bojio had already changed her clothes and was walking out of the studio. Chin Mo didn't leave because he had something to discuss. Bojio wanted to buy some medicine. As long as she took the medicine within 24 hours, she would be fine. When she left, Bojio took the black mask from the filming crew. She wore it and was about to cross the traffic light. Wait a minute. The person who spoke wasn't very fluent in Chinese, because the two words that came out of his mouth carried a unique accent of a foreigner. Bojio turned towards the direction of the voice. The person who stopped her was a middle-aged foreigner. He was dressed in a traditional Chinese tunic suit, which made him look elegant. For a foreigner, to be elegant, this person's experience would not be very low. I saw your advertisement just now. Are you interested in acting in the movie? Old William asked directly. He didn't care what stupid conditions the youngster had to come up with in order to become famous. As long as he could maintain the state he had been in during the advertisement, he would agree. After all, perfection in the movie was the most important. However, he hadn't expected the youngster to reply. The youth only gave him 2 words, no. His tone was calm and emotionless. The youngster seemed to be in a hurry as he walked towards the opposite direction. Old William stilled for a moment before blurting out, I don't think you know who I am. You should have heard of Hollywood. The youngster paused, arching a brow. I don't care who you are, I'm not interested in acting in the movie. Old William hadn't expected such an answer. Hadn't he always wanted to be famous? Acting in a movie will bring you more attention than playing esports. Old William felt that it wasn't logical. That's not what I meant. I meant that you are a natural actor. Are you sure you don't want to try? I don't want to. Bojio wanted to buy some medicine. Once the Almighty was done, she might not have the chance to buy it. Old William stilled once more. This was the first time he wanted someone to act in his movie, but she wasn't interested at all. But you acted well just now. Why don't you want to act? Bojio watched as the foreigner followed her. She didn't care anymore and crossed the traffic light. No reason. The assistant next to him was a little surprised to see this. Over the years, no one had ever rejected the olive branch that director William had extended to them. He was a director who created stars. As long as the main character acted in his movie, even if they weren't popular before, they would be known quickly and become a superstar. Everyone had to admit that he was a world-class director. The movies he produced were equally shocking. Many Chinese celebrities wished they could be the lucky ones when they heard that director William was going to cast them. But this youngster, the assistant walked over and whispered something to her. Bojio arched a brow. The assistant smiled. You have to introduce yourself before you start the discussion. Director William really thinks that you fit the image of an actor in his mind. Do you want to reconsider? No, Bojio replied without hesitation. She had the cheekiness of a youngster. I have something to do. Since you are an international celebrity, you shouldn't keep following me. You might get photographed. The assistant had thought that everything would be resolved if she mentioned Director William's name. But from the looks of it, the youngster didn't seem to have any intention of acting. The assistant turned to look at his boss. The information we received wasn't accurate. If the youngster really wants to be famous, he wouldn't have rejected such a good opportunity. Director William was aware of this, but he could see the youngster's attitude. He wasn't moved at all. He started to panic. Think about it, who would be able to invite this youngster? Isn't he filming a commercial today? The assistant took a moment before replying, we have to contact movie queen, and Director William replied, hurry up, it would be best if we can have a meal together. After all, no one had expected to be rejected. If the media were to find out, it would definitely be a hot topic. William didn't care as long as he could invite the youngster into his movie, in the studio, Chin Mo was done with his discussion. He glanced over and asked the assistant, "Where's young Master Joe?" The agent took a long time before realizing that young Master Joe was referring to Big Spade. At such a close distance, he blushed slightly. "Ah. Big Spade asked me about the nearby pharmacy. He must have gone out to buy some medicine." "Buy medicine?" Chin Mo furrowed his brows. The assistant replied, "Yes, he must have gone out to buy flu medicine. It's easy to catch a cold in this weather." "Where's the pharmacy?" Chin Mo had always been cold and polite to strangers. But even so, the girl was still a little incoherent because she had such a long conversation with Almighty Chin. She said, "It's right across the studio, just past the traffic light. It's very easy to recognize." Chapter 957. Bojo wasn't familiar with birth control pills, but she knew it was better to keep a low profile when buying such pills. There weren't many people in the pharmacy, just a few scattered around. Fortunately, they were all elderly aunties. If it was an ordinary young lady and someone recognized her, the situation would definitely be bad. She didn't mind, but manager phone would probably go crazy. It was better not to have news of esports players buying birth control pills. Bojo wore a mask. She looked around but couldn't find what she was looking for. The medicine probably couldn't be placed on the counter, hence, she couldn't find it on the medicine rack. It seemed like she would have to ask the pharmacist. Bojo sighed inwardly as she walked towards the counter. "Hi, get me a box of birth control pills." The doctor standing at the counter glanced up at Bojo. "Which brand do you want?" There was a brand? For the first time, Bojo felt she wasn't cultured enough. She chose a conservative answer. "I'll take whichever brand has the best effect." However, it was this answer that made the shopping guide shake his head and murmur, "Young people nowadays are really..." Bojo wasn't young in her heart, but she hadn't come into contact with such things in her previous life. If it wasn't for the lack of time, she would have wanted to bring the Almighty's child back to the Fifth Avenue. But now... Bojo clenched her fists. This was the only way. A total of 25. Cash or Alipay? The pharmacist glanced over, scanning the barcode. Bojo felt that it wasn't a good time to use her phone. She reached into her pockets but didn't bring any cash. In the end, she inhaled deeply and used her phone. "Is WeChat okay?" "Yes." The pharmacist's expression didn't change. Bojo whipped out her phone. The moment she unlocked the screen, she received a message. It was from the Almighty with only 2 words. "Where are you?" Bojo glanced at the image of the cartoon. She hesitated for a moment but didn't reply. Instead, she opened the payment function. The pharmacist scanned the barcode and passed the medicine to her. Bojo lowered her gaze, her silver hair covering her face as she took the medicine. Suddenly, a deep and familiar voice rang out from above her head. "Shouldn't you explain what you're doing?" Bojo's back stiffened. She only had one hope in her heart, that the Almighty was like her, lacking knowledge in certain areas. The hand that was holding the medicine paused for a moment. Then Bojo quickly stuffed the medicine into her pocket. Even her gaming speed wasn't as fast as it was now. After she was done, Bojo glanced over, meeting Chin Mo's icy gaze behind her. She had never seen an Almighty like this. His deep eyes were extremely deep. Before she could say anything, Chin Mo had already reached out and pulled out the wrist that the youngster had stuffed into his pocket. His voice was as indifferent as the storm before the storm. "What is this?" Bojo opened her mouth, her throat moving. "Medicine." "What medicine?" Chin Mo's handsome face didn't show any emotion, but the cold aura he exuded could freeze the surroundings. Bojo didn't reply because she didn't know how to explain. Chin Mo glanced at the 2 words "Yuding." He wanted to crush the person in front of him and swallow her into his stomach. That way, she would know who exactly she belonged to. That way, she wouldn't have come to buy this medicine. If that was the case, she wouldn't be thinking of leaving even now. Chin Mo lowered his body, taking the medicine from Bojio's hands. Bojio watched as the medicine slowly deformed in his hands. It seemed as though he wanted to destroy it. But the Almighty's emotions didn't change. Because of this, Bojio knew that he was really angry. Chin Mo lowered his lids, clutching the box of medicine in his palms. With a voice that he had never used before, he said, "I asked you to wait at the same spot but you never waited. Just like at night, when I sleep, would think about what that arrogant little Jio is doing. I want to wake up earlier so that I can see her earlier. It's the first time I want to kiss someone but I can't do it. You probably don't understand this feeling at all. That's why you bought this medicine here." Bojio wanted to say something. But the Almighty seemed to be listening to her explanation. "Do you think I'm illiterate or that I don't recognize this brand? Since you don't want to be together, let's break up." After saying that, the Almighty only gave her a distant view of his back. Bojio had seen that back view way too many times before she had gotten close to the Almighty. But there had never been a time like this, when she couldn't breathe. She wasn't sure when it started to rain. When Bojio walked out, the Almighty was nowhere to be seen. He must have been picked up by the Chin family's car. Bojio clenched her fists, her gaze sinking. She stood in the rain, her hair slightly damp. Her back was still straight, but it had never been as listless as it was today. She was like a little tiger that had been caught in the rain and didn't know how to warm herself up. Perhaps because the person who could warm her up had left, she didn't care about the water splashing on her. That was how Feng Yi saw her when he rushed over. From what he could remember, the devilish youngster had never been like this. Had they quarreled? That was Feng Yi's first reaction. Where was Boss Chin? He glanced left and right, unable to find him. Feng Yi was almost certain that they had quarreled. He reached out to press down on his brows. His head started to hurt. If even little Spade was like this, he could almost imagine young Master Chin being in a bad mood and how low his aura would be for the entire day. He guessed that the managers of the various departments would be having a tough time. But how did they end up in such a state? With young Master Chin's personality, even if he was angry, he would have taken little Spade away to teach her a lesson. Why did he leave her here? Feng Yi frowned, bringing Bojio into the car. It wasn't good to be drenched like this. He tried to communicate with the youngster. Weren't you fine just now? How did you end up like this after buying some medicine? Bojio glanced out of the window, the rainwater trailing down the ends of her silver hair. She didn't care, her handsome face tilted to the side, hiding her expression. Her mind was still ringing with that sentence. Since you don't want to be together, let's break up. Breaking up was only a matter of time. She had no choice but to reject it. She had overestimated her tolerance. Just a few words could affect her to such an extent. If she waited until the Almighty found out about her identity, he would frown and look at her in disgust. She probably wouldn't be able to take it. Bojio reached out to press her fringe down. When her phone rang, her voice was slightly hoarse. Hello. It was a call from the school. Bojio's boarding application had been approved and the school had asked her to bring her luggage over. Even if she still had to participate in the competition, she still had to follow the school's basic procedures. In reality, Bojio wasn't in the mood to think about what the other party had said. But she could do something to distract her. If she stayed in the school, it wouldn't be too abrupt when she left. Bojio had been stalling for time. She understood all too well that no one would feel good when someone suddenly disappeared. But if everyone knew that the person beside them was an international criminal, He Honghua would probably be frightened. She didn't want to see that. This time, she had used her identity to return, which meant that some people were already aware of her return. Among them, there would be people who wanted her dead. If they found out about her identity, He Honghua would be in danger. Hence, she had to leave. Just like back then, even if she didn't want to leave her puppy without saying goodbye, she still had to leave. Bojio still remembered that night, after she had climbed onto the balcony, she had used a lot of strength to enter his room. In order to prevent her from attacking him at night, he had always placed some flowers and plants on the balcony. At that time, she hadn't cared about those things. After sneaking into the room, she had looked at him sleeping on the bed and leaned over to kiss his face. She thought that she might as well carry him away. She was strong anyway. But Bojo knew that her puppy wouldn't leave with her. He had his own things to do and his own family. It would be boring to watch her typing every day. And he would meet with danger. Just as her father had said, it wasn't suitable for the young lord of the hacker world to have friends around her. It was still raining outside. Droplets of rain fell on the car window. The Land Rover was very good at preventing rain, especially for military use. It was almost impossible to hear the sound of rain outside. But even so, the driver sitting in the driver's seat didn't dare to say anything at this time. Ever since his young master had entered the car, he had been sitting at the back without saying a word. Rainy days had always been his young master's taboo. Usually, his young master wouldn't go out at this time. This time, it was probably because young Master Joe was following him. Even though the weather wasn't good, his young master didn't seem to be uncomfortable. But now, where was young Master Joe? The driver didn't dare to ask this question because his young master's expression was unprecedentedly cold. Chin Mo didn't feel anything. From the start till the end, his left hand hadn't loosened. There was a box of medicine in his left hand. The box of medicine had been squeezed to a certain extent. Chin Mo's fingers were still the same as before, not softening in the slightest. If it wasn't for this box of medicine. Perhaps he could have told himself. He was different in that fellow's heart. Even though that fellow had many secrets. In front of him, she would treat him sincerely and wouldn't reject being with him. But now that he thought about it, he was the one who said they wanted to be together. It could be said that he had forced her. In her heart, perhaps he wasn't that different. But he was wrong to think that she treated him the same way he treated her. That feeling was as though he had taken a step forward confidently but didn't notice the steps in front of him. He missed his step and fell down with his head bleeding. The pain was unbearable. Chin Mo loosened his left hand and glanced at the car window. After the car reached the military courtyard, he remained in the same position. Movie Queen had just finished shopping with Yi Honghua. She had wanted to sit with Jiu for a chat, but when she opened the car door, only her son was left. What was this? Movie Queen arched a brow and looked at her son's face. Chin Mo alighted from the car, not caring if there were any raindrops on him. He said faintly, "I'm tired, I'll head upstairs first." The intelligent Movie Queen quickly realized that there was a problem. She wanted to head upstairs to ask him but felt that as a parent, she shouldn't interfere with her child's relationship. After entering the room, Chin Mo acted as though nothing had happened. He unbuttoned his shirt and threw his clothes to the side before entering the bathroom. He allowed the water to splash on his head, as though he was trying to clear his head. Indeed, he was much more clear-headed. At the very least, he knew that person's true thoughts. In hindsight, what was so good about that person? She had never been willing to listen to him, much less take him seriously. When had he, Chin Mo, been so lowly? Chin Mo chuckled. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. The coldness in his body didn't seem to be dissipating. Instead, it became thicker after he came out of the bathroom. He sat there, looking at his open laptop. His neck tilted back. Enough. It was indeed enough. But even though he said that, after Chin Mo came down from the stairs, Movie Queen noticed something different about her son. For example, he kept looking at his phone. He seemed to be waiting for someone's message. But when he saw the screen, his eyes dimmed again. When he finally received a message, it was from his secretary. "I'm going to the office." Chin Mo stood up. This was the first time he didn't want to have nothing to do. Time trickled by. Bojo was the last student to board the plane at No. 1 middle school. The dormitory manager's expression wasn't any better. But she didn't make things difficult for him. The news of Bojio moving into the male dormitory spread through the entire number 1 middle school in an instant. Of course, it attracted many onlookers. Everyone in the dormitory would stop and glance at Bojio. After all, the school hunk staying in the dormitory wasn't something they could be happy about. Moreover, he was an esports star. How many girls would be attracted to him? They didn't have any hope in the future. But there were some who were optimistic. With Bojio here, things would be easier. For example, a photo of the school hunk for 5 yuan. No one knew that Bojio had chosen to move in today because she didn't want to be alone. Chapter 958. The environment in the male dormitory could be described with 3 words: dirty, messy, and bad. Bojio carried her suitcase in. The person who was cooking instant noodles stilled. He hurriedly pulled out the plug and glanced to the side. It couldn't be, the school hunk was staying in our dormitory? There were 6 people in the dormitory, including Bojio. One of the other 5 was a thorny student from number 1 middle school. The thorny student laughed coldly. He still didn't like Bojio. He glanced to his left and right, intending to walk over in an imposing manner. But Bojio threw her suitcase up, stuffing one hand into her pocket. She was wearing her school uniform, her jacket half open. She stood sideways, looking as fierce as ever since she entered the school. Even her eyes were cold. "I'm not in a good mood today. Don't provoke me." The thorny student was even more displeased. Didn't she know there were rules in the dormitory? How dare she be so arrogant in his territory? What did she mean? "I say, do you still want to live?" Before the thorny student could finish his sentence, he reached out to grab the youngster's wrist. But the youngster twisted it cleanly. There was a loud bang. The thorny student was slightly dizzy from the fall. He glanced at the chandelier in the dormitory and shook his head. F***ck, why hadn't anyone told him that the top student was so good at fighting? Bojio lowered her lids. "First, I'm not in a good mood. Second, the one who provoked first is AB***tch. My patience is limited." The thorny student was really hurt. The one who cooked the noodles had always admired Bojio. Now that she was in such a state, he sighed. He hadn't expected the expert in the game to be so good in real life. The thorny student was convinced. He changed his attitude, and after he got up, he cleared a spot for Bojio, pouring her tea and water. Bojio sat on the only wooden chair in the dormitory. Her head hurt. She had never thought of being so domineering. But it seemed like she couldn't change her image anymore. "Boss, don't worry, no one would dare to provoke us in this building." The thorny student fanned her while gossiping. "But boss, why did you suddenly decide to stay in school? Shouldn't good students like you study at home?" Bojio glanced at him. "Based on what you're saying, those who stay on campus aren't good students? I want to experience life." "Experience life?" That thornhead let out a long sigh. He didn't really understand the world of a top student. When she spoke, she didn't forget to take in the surroundings. "I have a condition." "Conditional exchange?" The other 5 looked at each other. "Although I don't do homework, I can still solve some questions." "I can help you solve your homework. Similarly, don't let these things appear in the dormitory." Bojio pointed at the dirty socks that were strewn all over the place. "There are also these. Besides, we are all hunks and should know the most basic etiquette. It's fine to take off your shirt since the weather is hot, but walking around in just your underwear is an eyesore. If you have a good figure, it might be worth looking at. If you don't, are you showing your bottom line?" The boy, who was only wearing a pair of underwear, inexplicably felt like he had been shot. However, since everyone was handsome, everyone in the dormitory agreed. Most importantly, there might be girls coming to visit in the future. Bojio stood at the window, glancing down at the girls who were pacing back and forth. She didn't doubt their offensive abilities. Some of them will take pictures. You guys probably don't want to be caught in the most embarrassing scene. It isn't good to find a girlfriend like this. The moment Bojio finished her sentence, the boy in his underwear leaped into his bed. The boys who didn't care about their appearance changed their clothes and looked at themselves in the mirror. As the roommates of the school hunk, their looks had to be up to par. In the past, no girls had come to visit them. In the future, they would definitely be asked out by girls. From now on, they would have to take care of themselves. At first, the atmosphere was still all right. Suddenly, someone said, "Young Master Joe is here. Will young Master Chin come to visit in the future? Will my favorite Almighty Lin Feng come too?" Bojio didn't listen to what the person said. The two words, young Master Chin, seemed to have pierced a certain nerve. It wasn't painful, but the moment she thought about it, she became much quieter. Think about it, the entire Supreme Alliance team will come to our dorm. Young Master Chin's arrival will definitely attract a huge crowd. The person was completely immersed in his own imagination. Bojio glanced up, her voice calm. He won't come. Ah. The people in the dorm were confused. Why did young Master Joe look like he had fallen out of love? No, they couldn't make wild guesses. In the past, they had thought that young Master Joe was definitely gay like the rumors said. But now, which gay was that strong? The rumors couldn't be trusted. But why did young Master Joe come to stay in the dorm? It was a mystery. Do you have a cigarette? Suddenly, the young man spoke again, interrupting his roommate's thoughts. Give me one. He even smoked? This didn't match their image of the top student in school. Second brother, watch the corridor. Howl when the hostel manager comes. The moment the thornhead spoke, even the boy in underwear cooperated. Their efficiency was high. It was obvious that they had done such things often. Smoking had always been a group activity. It was normal for everyone to have a cigarette in the high school dorm. But it was hard for them to accept the fact that the school hunk smoked. Bojio didn't look at their shocked gazes. She tilted her head and lit the cigarette. She stood by the window, not wanting to move. Hey, don't you think the school hunk is a little listless? He looks completely different from when he beat me up. He's probably thinking about the competition. Didn't you see his cooperation with young Master Chin? It was amazing. Bojio turned at the mention of young Master Chin. Didn't I mention that I'm not in a good mood? You gave the entire dorm a show of strength the moment you entered. It was obvious you weren't in a good mood. But why? Do you want to know the reason? Bojio flicked the cigarette ash, her gaze deepening. The 5 roommates looked at the youngster, nodding in unison. Bojio glanced up, her voice cold. I was dumped by young Master Chin. Everyone. Didn't he say he wasn't gay? It was finally quiet. No one mentioned young Master Chin's name again. Bojio extinguished the cigarette and glanced at her phone screen. She hesitated for a long time but didn't send the message. Her roommates didn't dare to talk about her situation since young Master Joe's martial arts skills were too strong. But young Master Joe was probably the only one who could be so handsome after falling out of love. Bojio's mood didn't change even after 2 consecutive cigarettes. She leaned against the wall. Even if she wasn't handsome, she was still listless. The atmosphere in the room was heavy. Her roommates felt that since their new boss was here, they had to celebrate. Do you want to go out for a meal? The big plate chicken at the school entrance is a must-have. Bojio glanced at them. Indeed, she wanted to go out for a walk. Staying here like this made her feel stifled. Let's go. Bojio extinguished the cigarette and walked out. There was a new scenery in number 1 middle school today. The other 5 walked in front. The youngster stuffed her hands into her pockets and followed behind. She wore a black mask and lowered her head to look at her phone. The girls passing by felt their hearts go out of control. Ever since Bojio joined the competition, She hadn't been to school much. Now that she was living in the dormitory, it became a benefit for the girls. The legendary Big Plate Chicken was just opposite the school. It was just a road away. Since it wasn't summer break yet, the weather wasn't particularly hot. Setting up a stall outside the shop and enjoying the natural breeze while eating was a form of enjoyment for the male high school students. Beer was a must. Since she didn't have any lessons today, she was just living in the school. Thorny took a bottle of beer. Just as he was about to pour half a glass for Bojo, the youngster took a bottle over. She bit down on it, opened the cap and gulped it down. The 5 roommates were stunned once more. They watched as the youngster drank without a change in expression. Their school hunk was indeed a ruthless character. They probably noticed that Bojo was looking at her phone. Someone couldn't help but ask, "Young Master Joe, what are you looking at? Why are you so engrossed?" "Nothing." Bojo closed the WeChat page and took another sip of beer. That person didn't think there was anything interesting on the phone. He couldn't understand why young Master Joe was looking at an empty WeChat screen. This meal. Bojo didn't eat much. She just sat there and drank silently. Because it was by the side of the road, anyone who drove would be able to see it as long as they opened the windows. When she opened the 4th bottle of beer, Bojo paused. Bojo paused for a moment. It wasn't because of anything else, but because of the familiar military Land Rover that was driving over. The car plate was unique and there was only one in the entire Jung City. Bojo recognized the car and so did her roommates. One of them blurted out, "Isn't that young Master Chin's car?" Only then did he realize something and shut his mouth. It was indeed a car Chin Mo often took. The windows weren't closed. They could clearly see that handsome and aloof face. The driver noticed them and paused for a moment. "Young Master, it's young Master Joe." Chin Mo glanced over at Bojo and said calmly, "Let's go." The driver was puzzled. Usually, young Master would ask young Master Joe to get in the car. But today, the roommates who were eating chicken were still thinking about young Master Chin's gaze. He must have looked over, but the next second, the Land Rover drove away. He turned back to look at the youngster's expression. Bojo didn't say anything. She retracted her gaze and ordered another bottle of beer. The roommates were dumbfounded. If they continued drinking, the lovelorn person would be fine, but all of them would collapse. Honestly, the school hunk was a little scary when he was lovelorn. On the other side, the Land Rover was still driving forward. It wasn't going fast. Firstly, the driver was still in shock. Secondly, his young master's gaze was on the rearview mirror. He didn't urge him to drive faster. Instead, he seemed to be waiting for someone. Chin Mo was indeed waiting for someone. He glanced at the rearview mirror, hoping to see the youngster chasing after him. But he didn't. He had glanced at his phone countless times today. He had told himself that as long as that person sent him a message, regardless of what was important to her, he would try not to be too domineering. Once again, reality hit him. That person didn't care about him at all. Feelings were similar to multiplication. As long as one side was 0, the result would be 0. Chin Mo tilted his head, his gaze lowered. The driver wasn't sure what his young master was thinking. He kept staring at the rearview mirror until they left the road. Then, his gaze changed. However, it became even more lifeless. It was as though he had returned to the time when he had known young Master Joe. He wasn't interested in anything. His emotions were indifferent. His gaze was indifferent too. This kind of young master was really worrying. The scenery outside the car window retreated. Time trickled by. Bojo didn't continue drinking. She took out her wallet to settle the bill. She glanced at her roommate who was still vomiting in the corner. She stood there and lit another cigarette. She had never smoked so much before. Even when she was on her period, she would only smoke half a cigarette to relieve the pain. But it didn't seem right not to smoke. Perhaps she had never expected that person to treat her like an ordinary person, brushing past her with such an indifferent expression. Her heart tightened. This should be the lightest punishment. When the Almighty found out about her true identity, would he be 100 times colder? No one could predict it. She should do something else to stop herself from thinking about it. That way, it wouldn't be so boring. It would be more natural for them to meet again in the National League. Bojo knew that she wasn't being fair. But the Almighty might not know that he liked her in her high school facade. In reality, the real her wasn't that innocent. Underneath this facade, she was an international criminal. He had said that he would capture Z personally and send her to jail. Bojo didn't regret taking this path. But sometimes, she would think that it would be great if that person could accompany her on this path. But Bojo knew that they were destined to walk different paths. Their methods were different. The Almighty followed the law. And she used her own methods. If it was possible, she hoped that in his heart, she would be the person he wanted to separate from and not a criminal. Chin Group Club. Numerous laptops were switched on at the same time. A meeting was being held in the meeting room. Anyone with eyes could see that Boss Chin's pressure was lower than any other day. It was probably too low. He wasn't even paying attention during the meeting. But to them, it wasn't that bad. Other than the slight fear, everything else was fine. The moment the words, "meeting" ended, were heard. The managers fled the scene hurriedly. Feng Yi had wanted to talk to him about Little Spade, but from the looks of it, anyone who mentioned that name wouldn't have a good ending. Chapter 959. Chin Mo still remembered when he received this lighter. He couldn't wait to hold it in his hand and play with it several times. He couldn't get enough of it and liked it no matter how much he looked at it. He didn't want anyone else to touch it except him. So he always carried it with him. Chin Mo knew very well that the girl didn't know what day it was. From her wandering eyes, it could be seen that she had forgotten everything, and her guilty conscience could be seen. The next day, she gave him such a thing. It was because the girl was the one who gave him the lighter that he couldn't bear to part with it. But at the end of the day, he had used some tricks to get this gift from her. Chin Mo's fingers tightened, and his eyes deepened. Captain. Coco had just finished a live broadcast and was still wearing his uniform. He wanted to take advantage of the break to come in to rest and seek comfort from his captain. As the person who carried the external publicity of the entire team, Coco would sometimes appear in the company. But he hadn't seen Manager Feng today, so he didn't know how Chin Mo was feeling today. After hearing the sound, Chin Mo glanced sideways. Coco sat on the sofa, his tiger teeth exposed. He reached out and tugged at his shirt. Captain, next time when you answer questions in the live broadcast, you and Little Spade should go. 80% of the people are asking me if you are really together. I said you are brothers, but they didn't believe me. I'm not good at lying, so I almost exposed you. Coco spoke for a while. Seeing that his captain didn't even look at him, he hopped over, holding a bag of yogurt in his mouth and looking at Chin Mo. The captain didn't even look at him. He was holding something in his hand. Coco looked for a while. He really didn't understand what was so good about this little thing. Why would the captain look at it for so long? After drinking the yogurt, Coco threw the bag away and asked curiously, "Captain, what is this?" Coco's question seemed to finally pull Chin Mo's eyes back. Lighter. Chin Mo's voice was very calm, as if the thing in his hand was nothing special. Coco widened his eyes. This is a lighter? This shape? It looks good. Where did you buy it? Chin Mo remained silent. But even so, Coco didn't notice that his captain was in a bad mood. He continued to look at the pure silver lighter. The more he looked, the more he liked it. Let me try lighting a cigarette. Why are you lighting a cigarette? Chin Mo arched a brow and threw the cigarette lighter to the side. Such an ugly thing. Ugly? Coco looked at his captain's side profile. There was no emotion on it. The naive Coco thought that his captain simply didn't like the igniter. "Captain, if you think it's ugly, give it to me. I think it looks good." When Chin Mo heard that, he lifted his eyes and glanced at Coco. Her gaze was so cold that Coco's scalp went numb. He thought he had said something wrong, and his left hand felt like it was frozen. What did the captain mean? He had already said that it was ugly. Doesn't that mean I don't like it? Why was she looking at him as if she wanted to chop off his hand in the next second? Just when Coco thought that the captain would say something to him, Coco's eyes widened. A cold and indifferent voice rang out again, "Up to you." Up to you? Did the captain mean that he could take the lighter away? But that wasn't what the captain's gaze said. Coco confirmed again. "Can I really take it away? Didn't I say up to you?" Chin Mo sat on the sheepskin office chair. His slender and fair fingers flipped open the contract beside him. He had a handsome face, but there wasn't a trace of warmth in his voice. Instead, it was cold for no reason. Coco saw that his captain's expression was really unfriendly. He could only shut his mouth and tentatively reached out to touch the electronic lighter. Seeing that there wasn't any reaction, he gathered his courage and put it in his pocket. He turned to leave. Chin Mo, who was sitting on the office chair, paused for a moment. When he came back to his senses, the words came out of his mouth. "Put it back." Coco turned back to look at his captain. His gaze was a little shocked. After all, his captain had never gone back on his words. After Chin Mo met Coco's gaze, his voice became faint. "You can choose another one. Didn't you always like the mouse I used before?" When Coco heard this, his focus immediately shifted. He put the lighter on the table and said excitedly, "Captain means that I can take that mouse." N. Chin Mo said, holding the lighter in his hand again. Of course, Coco saw this scene. He was very puzzled. What did the captain think of this lighter? If he said it wasn't important, why did he treasure it so much? One had to know that the captain's mouse was a limited edition. Whether it was the feel or the appearance, it was first class. In the past, he wouldn't even let him touch it. Now, in order to keep the lighter, he directly abandoned the mouse. If he said it was important, just now, the captain seemed to want to throw it away. What was going on? Before Coco could figure it out, he was picked up by Feng Yi, who came to arrange work. Along the way, Coco told everything he saw to their manager. He wanted Feng Yi to help him analyze what was going on. After listening, Manager Feng frowned even more. It seemed that he still had to have a good talk with those two people, in the CEO's office. Without Coco, everything seemed unusually quiet. Chin Mo glanced at the lighter in his palm and slid open the phone screen. There was still no message in the WeChat dialog box. When Feng Yi pushed the door and walked in, this was the scene he saw. "Since you want to contact him, why don't you call Little Spade directly?" Hearing this, Chin Mo looked up at him, even his voice was cold. "Is the company very free today?" How could it be, very busy? As a manager, Feng Yi still dared to say some things. "If you continue like this, how are you going to play in the competition? Besides, Little Spade usually listens to you. Is there a misunderstanding?" Chin Mo didn't say anything. Feng Yi continued, "In a relationship, there are some things that have to be said clearly. It's useless for you to sit here like this." Chin Mo sat back and pulled off his tie, full of abstinence. "The door is behind you." That meant that he could go. Feng Yi shut his mouth but felt that it was necessary to clarify. "What exactly are you angry about?" This was a question without an answer. The man in front of him was still looking at the contract in his hands, cold and without a trace of space. Feng Yi knew that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of him even if he continued asking. He glanced at the lighter that Coco had mentioned. It was obviously too important, hence, even though he was angry, he didn't throw it away. It should be from Little Spade. It seemed like he had to put in more effort to find out the reason. As the manager of the club, he didn't just have to guard against his players dating outsiders, he also had to guard against them dating insiders. You don't have to worry about my condition. Feng Yi waited for Qin Mo to speak, but he didn't say the reason. Instead, he said faintly, there won't be any problems in the competition. At this point, Feng Yi didn't know what else to say. He could only solve the problem from the side. To solve the problem from the side was to ask the other party. After leaving the office, the first thing Feng Yi did was to call Bojiu. The youngster's phone went through but no one picked up. Feng Yi pressed his head, unaware that Bojiu had drunk alcohol in the afternoon. Bojiu drank around 10 bottles of Budweiser alone. After finishing, she returned to the dormitory and climbed onto the bed. She slept on the upper bunk, which was much quieter than the lower bunk. Classes started on Sunday afternoon. Bojiu wasn't in the mood to go to class. She got on the bed, opened the quilt, and covered her head with it. She listened to the sound of rain outside. The scene on the street was still replaying in her mind. From afar, that person had been sitting in a car. He had seen her but his gaze had been indifferent, as though she was just an ordinary person. Bojiu froze, her heart clenched tightly. She couldn't fall asleep at first. But after the alcohol kicked in, drowsiness slowly crept over her. Her chest was still unable to accept the emptiness, as though she had lost something. Fortunately, alcohol was useful, it could help her sleep. Hence, the sleeping Bojiu didn't hear her phone vibrating. Her roommates didn't dare to disturb her, but when the phone kept ringing, they guessed that something had happened. Thorny's roommates first looked at the caller ID. The name, Fox Phone, was especially eye-catching. But since it was the school hunk's phone, they didn't dare to touch it. They could only wait for the ringing to subside. The sleeping Bojiu was dreaming. Her dreams were filled with scenes from her childhood. When she woke up, there was no one in the dormitory. Everyone had probably gone to class. Bojiu lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling in a daze. During this period of time, Bojiu had been with Qin Mo ever since that day. The sight of no one in the room when she opened her eyes had become rare. Because every time she woke up, there would be someone by her side. But now, it was obvious that she wouldn't be able to enjoy such treatment anymore. Bojiu tilted her head. She was listless, her movements weren't as agile as before. Coincidentally, the headmaster had brought someone from the student council to check on the dormitory. Classes had started but there were still students sleeping in the dormitory. Coincidentally, the school director came to inspect the dormitory with people from the student union. Classes had already started, but there were still students sleeping in the dormitory. One could imagine that no matter who that person was, the headmaster's expression would not be too good. But because it was Bojiu, he didn't punish her too harshly. Go to the field and do frog jumps. Go to class after you do 100. The headmaster wasn't bad. He was strict with the students but he treated them well. Bojiu respected him even though she hadn't been to school. Moreover, she didn't want to be idle. When she reached the field, she squatted down, placed her hands behind her back and started to jump. Bojiu's jump attracted the attention of many students. Look, isn't that the top student? Frog jumps on the first day of school. My Highness Jiu is so unlucky to be caught by the devil. But what should we do with Highness Jiu's cute and handsome jumping? Some of the students from the normal classes started to discuss openly. The teacher standing on the podium knocked heavily on the blackboard. Pull your attention back. It seemed like she would have to discuss with the headmaster. Even if she wanted to punish someone, she couldn't do it on the field. It was too eye-catching. It was indeed eye-catching. With Bojiu's silver hair and face, it was rare to see her jumping with her hands behind her back. It was no wonder people wanted to see it. But as the saying went, enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road. Number 1 middle school and number 2 middle school were close to each other. Even though the useless number 2 middle school's field wasn't as big as number 1 middle school's field. However, the two fields were also next to each other, separated by a net. It was common for middle year 2 youngsters to be punished. However, the moment he stepped out, he saw Bojio bouncing on the number 1 middle school field. Instantly, he became excited. He didn't even care about the teacher who was hitting him with a book. He ran over and asked Bojio, "Hey, what were you punished for?" Bojio didn't reply. The teenager continued, "Let me tell you, I'm being punished unjustly this time. Do you still remember when I asked you to play for me to confirm my relationship with my girlfriend? I just went to your number 1 middle school and gave my girlfriend lunch. I even used the roses planted in the school to prove my innocence. Not only did your director get angry when he saw me, he even punished me." Bojio slowed down. She glanced at him and said slowly, "That's a good punishment. I can't stand people like you who show affection everywhere." The number 2 middle school youngster, it took time for the frog to jump. The school hunk of number 1 middle school and the boss of number 2 middle school were punished at the same time. But one of them was clean and handsome from start to finish. The other one was hit on the head by the headmaster. Shui Yao Yao saw the scene too. She placed the pencil in her hand aside, her gaze on the youngster didn't retract. The school had to pass the test in order to successfully participate in the National League. Hence, Bojio had always been cooperative. The headmaster was satisfied with the youngster's attitude and didn't call his parents. Bojio was also glad that his parents weren't notified. After all, Qin Mo's name was written in her contact list. But after this time, even if he was notified, he probably wouldn't come. Bojio sat on the edge of the field. Bojio sat at the edge of the field, using the back of her hand to wipe the sweat that was dripping down her sharp chin. The fangirls couldn't control themselves. The teachers probably knew that no one was listening to this class. Everyone's attention was on the field. But Bojio's attention was on her phone. She couldn't be too presumptuous in front of the headmaster. She found a secluded place and wanted to call manager phone. Chapter 960. The Japanese? The team that Hoshino was in? Alright, I'll be there in a while. Bojio stood up. She had just done her frog jumps and her legs weren't as nimble. She knocked on the phone but didn't reply immediately. "Brother Mo, are you there?" Phony glanced over at Qin Mo, who was putting on his uniform. He lowered his voice. "MMH, I'm here." Bojio paused, listening to the faint voice from the other end of the phone. "Who are you talking to?" He didn't know why he felt guilty, so he directly hung up the phone. Phony listened to the busy tone, meeting Qin Mo's gaze. His gaze was calm, carrying an indescribable depth. With Boss Qin's intelligence, he must have guessed who was on the other end. But for some reason, he didn't seem to understand. Boss Qin lowered his head and adjusted his sleeves, asking. Phony coughed lightly. "It's Little Spade, the Japanese are here and they have to gather the entire team." Qin Mo didn't say anything else. As a manager who understood his team members' thoughts, Phony added, "Little Spade said she'll be here in a while." Qin Mo stuffed a hand into his pocket, arching a brow. "Oh. She's so scared that she hung up on you. Are you sure she'll be here in a while?" Phony coughed again. This time, it wasn't intentional but he really choked. He lowered his voice. "You've been waiting for her news the entire day. I asked you to contact her but you didn't. Boss Qin, why do you have to do this?" Qin Mo glanced at him. When he spoke again, his voice was hoarse. "I just wanted to know my position in her heart. Now, it's clear." Phony opened his mouth. The words were at the tip of his tongue but he couldn't say them. He had never seen Qin Mo in such a state. Even though he was still standing, when he glanced out of the window, there was a sense of desolation. Phony understood that whoever started the trouble had to end it. He still had to wait for Little Spade. "Let's go." Qin Mo picked up the cigarette lighter on his desk. The collar of his pure black uniform was flipped up, revealing his chiseled and cold handsome face. Phony heaved a long sigh and rubbed his head. On the other side, it wasn't convenient for Bojo to apply for leave the moment she finished her frog jumps. Fortunately, Yao Yao was there to testify for her. It was something that happened in the club. Otherwise, with the suspicious gaze of the headmaster, Bojo would really have to climb over the wall if she wanted to come out. The two of them took a taxi. They didn't have time to change into their combat uniforms, so they put on their school uniforms. It wasn't far from the school to the club. Bojo glanced down at her phone. She knew the problem wasn't with the medicine. In fact, the Almighty had restrained himself every time he wanted her because he was afraid of hurting her. She knew very well what the problem was. However, there were some things that could not be said. Moreover, she was about to leave. Bojo swiped the screen before sliding it back. Shui Yao Yao obviously noticed that the person sitting next to her wasn't in the right state of mind. She called out softly, "Your Highness Jiu." Bojo glanced over. "What is it? Is something the matter?" Shui Yao Yao asked directly. Bojo paused for a moment before smiling. "Nothing much, I made a mistake and am reflecting on it." "Face the wall in front of my phone and reflect?" Shui Yao Yao didn't understand. Bojo glanced at the WeChat page again, thinking about how the person she was going to meet would treat her like a stranger. Her eyes dimmed and her silver hair drooped down. Shui Yao Yao paused. She didn't look like she was fine. But that was probably how Bojo was. When there was no one around, no matter how lazy and dispirited she was, it wouldn't affect her devilish nature. Hence, when she reached the club, she saw a baby-faced person pointing at her. "That's the guy I'm going to PK with." Bojo swept him a glance, her voice nonchalant. "Who are you?" The baby-faced person's eyes widened. "How can you not know who I am? Are you very handsome? Why should I know you?" Bojo walked forward, her gaze sweeping over the baby-faced person's combat uniform. She arched a brow. The baby-faced person noticed her gaze, straightening his body. "You should know now, I just defeated one of your members." "How is it? Do you want to PK with me?" Bojo paused, a hint of a smile on her face. "I'm the first official member of our team to arrive. Is there anything to be proud of when the Japanese's first member defeated our reserve team?" Bojo seemed to be more lethal when she wasn't in a good mood, even her words were sharper than usual. Shui Yao Yao thought, Her Highness Jiu must have spent a lot of time with the Almighty, her venomous tongue must have picked up at least 80% of her skills. The baby-faced person's face flushed red. Unfortunately, he had only fought with reserve team members, he hadn't fought with an official member of Supreme Alliance. With Bojo's words, he felt a suffocation in his chest, unable to take it down. At this moment, a chuckle came from the sky. "Isn't that easy? Let's find an official member to PK and see Supreme Alliance's strength." It was Watanabe. As he spoke, he glanced at Yu Cixin. "Captain, am I right?" Yu Cixin still had his long hair, but there wasn't a hint of femininity. When he glanced at Bojo, his gaze deepened. He yawned lazily. "Watanabe, how many times do you want me to repeat myself? Supreme Alliance is the club's decision, it's just an exchange, not a competition." Watanabe wanted to continue, but Bojo saw his gaze deepen. Bojo watched as the pretty boy's gaze deepened. With a lazy tone, he said, "In China, only the national champion has the right to compete with us." With that, Bojo glanced at the person. Mainan smiled at her and walked over. As he brushed past her, he said, "I'm curious. What's your relationship with Hoshino? Why does he pay so much attention to you?" Bojo glanced up, her lips lifting. Yu Cixin waited for the youngster to speak. Just then, a familiar voice came from behind. "You can ask me if you want to know." "Captain, when did you start being so nosy?" Yu Cixin turned towards the person who spoke. He was wearing the same uniform as him, his brows clear but his gaze was filled with warning. Yu Cixin chuckled. "All right, tell me, what do you see in him?" "I admire his gaming skills." Hoshino glanced at Yusishin. I've said that before. Yusishin knew that Hoshino was starting to get unhappy. He didn't want to test his limits, so he stuffed his hands into his pockets. It's just a joke, why are you so serious? Mr. Yusishin might have gone overboard with his joke. Another voice rang out. It was faint, slightly cold, and had a unique feel to it. Bojo didn't turn. She felt a warmth coming from her wrist, with a faint fragrance and a hint of tobacco. The familiar scent surrounded her along with the warmth. The next second, she saw the beautiful curve of his jaw. My teammate doesn't know your teammate, Chin-mo said, glancing down at her. He glanced down at Bojo. It's better not to make some jokes, don't you think? Bojo caught a glimpse of something else in his eyes, but before she could get a clear look, the Almighty shifted his gaze away. At the same time, he also let go of her wrist. His side profile was indeed as she had imagined, indifferent without a trace of warmth. Lin Feng, who didn't know how to read people's expressions, leaped over and said to Bojo, Little Spade, what's going on with you and Captain? Why is he treating you differently? Is he starting to feel bored and cold towards you? Don't worry, if Captain dares to abandon you, I'll stand by your side even if I have to take the risk of rebelling. Lin Feng's voice was soft, only the two of them could hear him. Bojo remained silent. Lin Feng felt that this matter had to be changed. Look at me, I'm so responsible. After sleeping with Yunhu, I immediately told the surrounding people to stop having any ideas about me. I'm going to have a family in the future, you have to let Captain know about this so that you can take the initiative. Bojo had mentioned that she hated people who showed off their affection the most. She glanced over, her tone calm. You're the one who takes the initiative. Your lips are already torn, your words aren't convincing. If you don't have the strength to resist Almighty Yun's kisses, just say it, I won't laugh at you. Lin Feng was dealt a huge blow. He took out his phone and hurriedly looked at his lips. F***ck, it was really torn. Didn't Yunhu know how to restrain himself? How was he going to brag like this? Don't tell me you're like this in bed. Bojo's final attack successfully petrified Lin Feng. When he regained his senses, Lin Feng watched the youngster's back view, his heart stifled. Why were some people like this when they were in a bad mood? Little Bojo wasn't happy. Ever since she entered, he hadn't even glanced at her. Chin-mo walked in front, his hands in his pockets clenched for a moment before relaxing again. His indifferent gaze met Hoshino's face. They stood in different positions, their gazes intersecting. Feng Yi noticed the change in the situation, speaking with a smile, since it's just an exchange and not a competition, let's sit down and have a chat. Our friends from the media have been looking forward to the Japanese's arrival. Yusishin stilled, breaking into a smile. We won't be used to it if there are too many reporters. Feng Yi had expected him to say that, his lips lifting. Mr. Yusishin, don't worry, the Qin group has a media business, it's just an exchange, not a press conference like you are imagining. Yusishin narrowed his eyes. He had originally wanted to use the exchange as an excuse to take a closer look at Supreme Alliance's strengths. He hadn't expected them to use this as an excuse. It was no wonder Supreme Alliance was the wealthiest team in the industry. Supreme Alliance's manager was indeed an unscrupulous businessman. Actually, that wasn't the only reason Feng Yi had called the media over. It was because of Chin-mo's abnormal state. The media was there to remind Boss Chin that even if they had a conflict, it couldn't be displayed in front of other teams. Both of them were able to keep their composure. But because of their composure, Feng Yi was worried they would explode. After all, no one had ever been able to guess young Master Chin's thoughts correctly. A meeting between two teams, one of which was the Japanese, would be newsworthy. Even if the entire Japanese team wasn't present, Hoshino and Yusishin represented the entire Japanese team. Their captain and vice-captain were world-class esports experts who rarely showed their faces. Every word would become a headline in esports. The doll-faced man couldn't be rash even if he wanted to compete with Bojo. Both teams were good-looking, even if there was enmity between them, it wouldn't be displayed at such a moment. Etiquette was a basic rule of etiquette for both teams. Hence, it was a real exchange. Bojo wasn't interested in conversing. She sat very close to Hoshino and turned to glance at him. Hoshino could guess what she wanted to ask, sending a message over. I found out about Rao Rong, I'll send you the information when I get back. Bojo replied, okay. The receptionist walked over with a tray of fruits and tea. Feng Yi had arranged for this to be a friendly gesture. But the moment the receptionist placed the tray in front of Bojo, Hoshino interrupted. Hoshino suddenly said, she doesn't eat peaches. In that instant, the receptionist wasn't the only one who froze. Even Lin Feng and the others turned towards Hoshino. How did he know Little Spade didn't eat peaches? They had interacted with Little Spade for so long and yet, he didn't seem to eat peaches. After all, Little Spade wasn't a picky eater. Hoshino seemed familiar with something they didn't know. Even though Lin Feng was naive, he was still sensitive to such matters. Did they know each other? That was his first reaction. On Qin Mo's side, the hand holding the teacup froze. He lifted his eyes and looked at the youngster indifferently. Bojo knew she couldn't let the Almighty see through her. Hence, she reached for a peach slice and placed it in her mouth. In the past, she hadn't been able to eat peaches as they would break out in rashes. But this was different. Bojo lowered her lids, swallowing the peach slice before taking a sip of tea. Hoshino's reaction was quick. He smiled naturally and added, Watanabe, did you forget how you said it wasn't nutritious the last time you ate peaches? Watanabe pointed to himself. Was that true? It seemed like there was, so he nodded. Everyone was enlightened. So he was referring to Watanabe. They had assumed Hoshino was referring to Little Spade. It was a beautiful misunderstanding. Qin Mo retracted his gaze. But he didn't release his grip. He knew it wasn't a misunderstanding. There was someone who knew him better than him. Or perhaps. Chapter 961. Qin Mo's gaze turned cold. There was an obvious change in the atmosphere. His pitch-black eyebrows were raised, and his expression was frosty. Sitting beside him was Lin Feng, the one who didn't know how to read people's expressions. He turned towards Hoshino. I heard from Mr. Hoshino that you admire our Little Spade. Hoshino didn't avoid the question. Instead, he turned to Bojo and smiled faintly. Yes. When Hoshino said the word, yes, Qin Mo's gaze deepened. Lin Feng still wanted to ask something, but he was stunned by the cold aura emanating from his captain. He could only shrink his head back. But even if Lin Feng didn't ask, it didn't mean Hoshino wouldn't continue. He seemed to have something to say to his fans since there were reporters around. I've watched every single one of Spade Z's matches. Be it in terms of skill or character, he is worthy of a battle with the Japanese. At the same time, I hope Supreme Alliance can win the National League, which is also the reason I came to Supreme Alliance. I want to have a match with him. The Japanese vice-captain thought so highly of him. If this video was broadcasted, to a certain extent, it would definitely reduce the existence of some anti-fans. After all, Hoshino's words were right there. His fans would also treat Spade Z as a decent opponent. Most importantly, it was time for some people to calm down. Even Hoshino recognized Spade Z's ability. Those who had been saying that Bojo had gotten to where she was because of their relationship had to think twice before they spoke, even if they weren't willing to admit it. Japan's influence in the esports industry. The strongest player in Asia had never failed before. Even the video of Hoshino's 1v3 against Xiangnan team was still on the internet. Almost everyone knew that he was a very low-key person. For him to give such an evaluation to Spade Z, most of the rumors would collapse on their own. Sensing the value of the news, the media at the scene immediately started a live broadcast. After all, they didn't expect Hoshino to admire a newcomer so much. For some reason, Feng Yi felt that it was dangerous to continue this topic. He glanced at his boss's side profile and forcefully changed the topic. Thank you for your kind words, Mr. Hoshino. Supreme Alliance will fight well in the upcoming finals. It seems like Supreme Alliance is confident in themselves. The person who said this was Yu Cixin. When he smiled, he gave off a dangerous vibe like that of a wild leopard. When he said this, he looked at Qin Emo. If Hoshino wanted to play against Spade Z, he wanted to see just how powerful the legendary 3000 knife cutting was. Watching other people's matches, one could only see the surface. If one didn't fight personally, how would one know who was stronger? Facing such a gaze, Qin Mo's handsome face didn't change at all. It seemed as though no matter what Yu Cixin said, it wouldn't affect him. This made Yu Cixin raise his eyebrows. He really wanted to fight with this team that made Hoshino look at them in a different light. On one hand, he wanted to understand why Hoshino was so interested in this team. On the other hand, he knew that Qin Mo's win rate was higher than his in the individual competition records. Qin Mo's name had once been a legend in the esports industry. They had thought that they would be able to compete with this person back then, but they didn't expect Supreme Alliance to not even make it to the national finals. Therefore, it wasn't difficult for the Japanese to win that match. At that time, some of the seniors were still glad that Supreme Alliance didn't participate. But in his eyes, Hoshino was the person he wanted to study the most. As for Qin Mo, he was a suitable opponent. Yu Cixin lifted the edge of his lips. The reporters filmed the scene and pulled the topic back to Hoshino. Almighty Hoshino admires Spade so much, but he doesn't seem to have interacted with Spade before. Hoshino laughed, taking out his phone and showing them the screen. I've followed him, but Spade hasn't replied. I'm still waiting. He really followed him? Why didn't they know? The reporters at the scene felt that their ability to capture news was terrible. Unbeknownst to them, Hoshino had added him before he came to the club. It was to make everything seem logical. Bojiu, who was familiar with him, understood his thoughts quickly. Even without any verbal communication, just a glance was enough to know what he was thinking, making everything seem logical. Bojiu smiled. I don't usually use the official Weibo account, I'm going to reply now. With that, she took out her phone, her slender and fair fingers unlocking the screen. After logging in, she clicked on the latest follow. It was a simple exchange of fans, but it immediately caused a wave of discussion online. Especially Hoshino's fans. My almighty Hoshino actually follows other teams, that doesn't make sense. Who is this Spade Z? I've never heard of him, is he from our country? I just went to search, he's the FC King of China's Zone C, Supreme Alliance's super rookie. Almighty Hoshino is interested in him? Previous poster, don't go off topic, I think it's a friendly follow. When has Almighty Hoshino ever followed others? I didn't see him like this during the International League. Take a look at the interview online. Almighty Hoshino said he wants to have a good match with Spade Z. He must be strong if he can attract Almighty Hoshino's interest. I've decided to take a look at this Chinese player. Faced with the sudden visit, the fans of Spade official fan club were a little confused, but that didn't stop them from welcoming him in a friendly manner. In an instant, Bojiu's negative comments on the internet lessened. After all, Hoshino was the first to follow Bojiu. With the addition of the interview, the topic of discussion soared. The media seized on this point, hoping for more interaction between Bojiu and Hoshino. Lin Feng, who was sitting beside Qin Mo, felt a chill starting from his neck. Even his scalp felt numb. It wasn't because of anything else, but his captain's grip on the teacup tightened, his eyes losing the last bit of warmth. Lin Feng saw with his own eyes that a layer of frost covered that handsome face in an instant. Qin Mo looked in the direction of the two, his cold and noble side profile expressionless. His gaze was deep and unmoving. Lin Feng could understand his captain's feelings. Hoshino was treating Little Spade too well. But according to Little Spade, wasn't his captain starting to give Little Spade the cold shoulder? Why did he care so much? Lin Feng felt that the relationship between two men was even more complicated than the relationship between a straight man and a woman. He couldn't analyze it, so he just shrunk his neck and acted as the background. This was to prevent the captain from giving him a look when he said something wrong and letting him experience it himself. Fortunately, the interview wasn't long. If not, Lin Feng suspected that the teacup would be crushed by his captain. Yu Cixin was the first to stand up. He stuffed a hand into his pocket and looked at Qin Mo. I hope the next time we meet Supreme Alliance, it will be on an esports competition. By the way, Mr. Qin, have you thought of a way to deal with Xiangnan? Your team doesn't seem to be mature. The competition is about skills, not maturity. Qin Mo's voice was calm. His words stopped Yu Cixin from probing further. He smiled. Just as he was about to turn his head and ask Hoshino to leave, he saw that the tripod was showing signs of loosening. It looked like it was about to fall. Bojiu and Hoshino were still standing under the tripod. Qin Mo had obviously noticed it earlier than Yu Cixin because the moment Yu Cixin's pupils constricted, Qin Mo had already moved. What he hadn't expected was that at that moment, the youngster moved as well. Her movements were extremely fast, just like what he had seen countless times. Whether it was her landing or her focus, they were all beautiful, including her reaching out to grab Hoshino's wrist and stepping to the side, using her back to block him. It was reflected in Qin Mo's eyes. At that moment, he remembered the start of the Cold War. He hadn't taken the initiative to look for her ever since. He hadn't taken the initiative to call or send any messages either. When he saw her, he would brush past her. He wouldn't even smile as a passerby. But she definitely didn't know. He was in so much pain. Because in her eyes, there was someone more important. There was a dull thud. Qin Mo's shoulder withstood the pressure. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Even the staff member who was originally in charge of the camera showed a terrified expression. No one had expected the camera to malfunction. Everyone's face was pale. They covered their mouths as they watched the scene unfold. When Bojiu heard the noise, she turned over and saw the Almighty standing behind her, blocking the thing for her. He looked into her eyes, his thick brows furrowed slightly from the pain. His aura was burning brightly. His eyes were as clear and deep as the sea, tinged with a faint ink that could drown a person. His handsome face gradually turned pale under the light. The paler his skin was, the harder it was for people to look away from him. It was as though she could see his thoughts through his skin. Bojiu suddenly realized something. She let go of Hoshino and stood up, opening her mouth to explain. Qin Mo had already kicked the camera away, heading towards the exit, leaving her with nothing but coldness. This time, Bojiu didn't hesitate. She chased after him. Hoshino chuckled, straightening himself and turning to the dumbfounded crowd. I never expected Spade Z to be so skilled in real life. Fortunately, Hoshino was there to smooth things over. Otherwise, Feng Yi wouldn't know how to continue the conversation. The Japanese had met with an accident in their territory. If the news got out, the consequences would be dire. Right now, Feng Yi was thankful for Little Spade's subconscious action. If it had been the other way around and Hoshino had protected Little Spade, Supreme Alliance would have been embroiled in a series of fights between anti-fans. The consequences would have been dire. Yu Cixin's emotions had already changed. He immediately rushed over and pulled Hoshino over. His voice was a little deep. How are you? Are you hurt? I'm fine. Hoshino turned, smiling faintly at Feng Yi. Fortunately, Spade was here, help me thank her. Yu Cixin's gaze dimmed. He glanced at the camera, his expression dark. But that was it. The media reports were basically about an accident during the interview and how Spade Z had protected Hoshino. Feng Yi's situation was much easier to deal with, but he was more worried about young Master Qin's health. Even if he hadn't used much strength, the back of young Master Qin's shoulder should have been red. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was young Master Qin's back view, which seemed to have lost all his warmth. But what Feng Yi didn't expect was that even so, that person still maintained a trace of rationality. No, that wasn't right, it wasn't rationality, it was more like digging 3 feet into the ground to find a person. Because when he received the call, the voice on the other side of the phone was extremely cold. Go check, who touched the camera's tripod? I'll go check the video now. Feng Yi knew that this happened because of his incompetence as a manager. But he didn't expect such a problem to happen in the Qin Group Club. After all, no one in Jiang City dared to do such things in front of the Qin family. But Feng Yi wasn't sure if this incident was targeted at the Supreme Alliance or Little Spade. But no matter which one it was targeted at, in young Master Qin's eyes, it was probably a death sentence. Other than Qin Mo, it was obvious that Hoshino and Yu Cixin had realized something. The former was worried that this attack was targeted at Z. She had experienced too many similar incidents and was worried that this attack was targeted at Z. The latter was born in a country, his beast-like instincts made it hard for him not to think of conspiracies. But Yu Cixin knew that such a childish attack wouldn't be targeted at his identity. That position was either to disqualify Hoshino or to disqualify Spade Z. Based on the current situation, the latter was more likely. If Spade Z and Qin Mo hadn't blocked it, Yu Cixin would have suspected Supreme Alliance. But on second thought, if one of them was injured here, Supreme Alliance would suffer the greatest loss. Hence, this attack was definitely targeted at Spade Z. Yu Cixin raised a brow. With the youngster's skills, he could have easily avoided the tripod, but because he was afraid Hoshino would be injured, he used his back to block it. Was this really Spade Z's reaction after analyzing the pros and cons and not his instinct? If it was instinct, Hoshino and this Spade Z. Yu Cixin narrowed his eyes. He didn't know that Hoshino was hiding something from him. Time trickled by. Bo Jiu rushed out and watched as the person hung up the phone. Without turning back, she held on to the railing with one hand and jumped over. But the person was already in the car and didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Bo Jiu rushed over, her long legs blocking the car door. Her eyes were dark and she was about to speak. Chapter 962. Bo Jiu managed to stop him with much difficulty. Of course, she wasn't going to let him leave just like that. Brother Mo, your instinctive reaction wasn't bad, Qin Mo said, his gaze deep and his voice cold. Qin Mo spoke again, his gaze deep and his voice cold. Should I be asking you how you met Hoshino? I don't even know you can't eat peaches. How many things have you been hiding from me? Do you want me to tell you everything? Every time I don't contact you, you don't take the initiative to contact me either. You do what you want to do and aren't affected by anything. I'm different. Every time I'm in a meeting, I'm thinking about what this person is doing. Why isn't she coaxing me? As long as she sends a word, even if it's just a phone call, a lot of things can be changed. In the end, you just don't want to reconcile, right? Bo Jiu's fingers froze. She didn't know how to reply because the Almighty had hit the nail on the head. Qin Mo glanced at her and slowly turned his face. His black hair hung down, blocking his eyes. No one could see his expression. Since you don't want to be close to me, we will separate as you wish. Both of us probably don't like people who cling to us. Clingy, these 4 words. Bo Jiu lost most of her energy. But instead of saying it for Bo Jiu, it was more appropriate to say it was for himself. Sometimes, even with all his sincerity and hard work, it only proved that the other party didn't care. Especially after witnessing the scene just now. Qin Mo reached out to close the car door. After a moment of silence, his voice was cold. Drive. The driver wasn't from the same family. When he started the car, he didn't dare to look behind him. The coldness emanating from Boss Qin seemed to be able to freeze him. Bo Jiu watched as the black Land Rover disappeared into the parking lot. After a long time, she walked out, her steps getting heavier. It was as though she had returned to her younger days. She had wanted to be alone but had been forced to leave with her father. She wanted to bend down because it wouldn't hurt so much. But Bojo knew that to her, she could bend over anything except her waist. The burden she carried wouldn't allow her to do that. Bojo inhaled deeply, leaning against the wall for a while. She wanted to smoke but realized there was only a lollipop in her pocket. It was the one the Almighty had bought for her. Bojo took it out and held it in her hands. She thought she would never forget it. There was a woman who always kept 2 candies in her coat pocket because she liked candy. He was clearly such a cold and noble person who never ate sweets. Bojo reached out and pressed down on her silver fringe. When she opened her eyes again, there was an obvious change in her pupils. He pressed the familiar string of numbers on his phone. Hoshino, who was standing beside Yusishin, took a step back. I'm going to relieve myself. Yusishin raised his eyebrows and said with an indescribable evil aura, "Be careful." Hoshino glanced at him. Got it. This person always treated others like porcelain dolls. It was interesting. Crossing the corridor, Hoshino took out the vibrating phone from his pocket and placed it beside his ear. Hello, Z, who knows about your team coming today? Bojo's questions were always direct. Hoshino knew what she was getting at. The reason should be within Supreme Alliance. Our visit was decided by Captain at the last minute and the other members aren't aware of it yet. Hence, the person who tampered with the camera must be someone from here. Other than the cameraman, the only person in charge is the floor supervisor. But from the looks of it, the person must have escaped. After the disguise, it would be hard to leave a trace even with the camera. Bojo was calm. That organization has their eyes on Supreme Alliance. More accurately, they have their eyes on me but they wouldn't know I'm Z. Which means someone is trying to drag me down to deal a heavy blow to Supreme Alliance. I'm sure you have found out what exactly happened to Chin Mo, right from the start. Bojo had wanted to know why her puppy had lost his memory. Now, she wanted to know even more. Her intuition told her that the terrorist organization's main target this time was the Almighty. Hoshino chuckled lightly. Z, you're as sharp as ever. I did find some information regarding Chin Mo and the person who impersonated you. They knew each other and almost became lovers. Hoshino chuckled lightly. Z, you're as sharp as ever. Lovers? Bojo's fingers stilled, her gaze wavering. Hoshino's voice was still ringing in her ears. But for some reason, Chin Mo started to treat this person coldly. It could even be said that he hated her. Bojo lowered her voice. That isn't strange. According to the Almighty, he wouldn't tolerate a criminal who hacked into someone else's computer. It has nothing to do with that. Hoshino paused when he heard the voice. Do you want to hear my analysis? MMH? Hoshino sighed inwardly when he heard the dispirited reply. He broke into a faint smile. Z, it's such a waste of your intelligence. You're really clueless when it comes to relationships. Before she could open her mouth, Hoshino continued. Chin Mo's matter is covered up deeply. Even with your identity, the information we can find is limited. That means we are only looking at the surface. What happened to Chin Mo is something only he knows, so the theory of lovers doesn't hold water. The main point is Z, the person who impersonated you this time, her brother was dealt with by you. At that time, someone exposed the hacker's hidden information to some powerful people, using the internet to control people's thoughts, just like the maiden's sacrifice. Even though the method is different, the truth is the same, distorting the truth and causing people to lose their bottom line. An entire school of students to a certain extent become people who can harm others at any time, but they don't know it. Do you still remember what you said at the time? The scariest thing isn't the devil but the human heart. Bojo glanced up, her gaze deepening. So it's him. Hoshino paused. Back then, you and Chin Mo worked together to send her brother to prison. Now that she's back, her target is Chin Mo, revenge. Bojo's handsome face was especially distinct under the sunlight. Her brother killed many people, it seems like she has inherited his legacy. Hoshino glanced out the window. It wasn't just revenge, she was even more vicious than her brother. She wanted Chinamo. In order to get what she wanted, she destroyed everything around her. Human lives weren't important to her, the dignity and innocence of others were just tools to be used. The maiden's sacrifice had destroyed too many people. Her first target wasn't the young lady you saved but Shui Yaoyao from your team. At that time, she created a small forum to discuss Shui Yaoyao's actions. Back then, she created a small forum to discuss Shui Yaoyao. Her target was always those who were still working hard. You should understand what her brother and she wanted to destroy. They wanted to control the world because that is how human nature is. But back then, she was just testing, a small test that caused Shui Yaoyao to be wronged for a few months. After that, she made her move in Tokyo. When she felt that it was about time, she came to China and started the official maiden sacrifice. This world shouldn't be like this. Some people clench their teeth and live their lives. They can't speak the truth after being oppressed because the moment they speak, people will jump out to oppose them. There are others who commit murder, commit arson, steal other people's hard work, steal other people's works, they will be forgiven. It won't be like this forever, Bojio interrupted. If not, what's the point of our existence? That's right. Hoshino laughed, his eyes bright and his teeth white. It won't be like this forever, so it's time for us to take action. What do you intend to do with Li Shui? She definitely won't admit to her crimes and those who don't care about plagiarism will try their best to clear her name. Bojio raised her hand, shielding her eyes from the glaring sunlight. When you weren't around, I hired a good lawyer. His surname is Bai and he has never lost a case. If Li Shui doesn't admit to her crimes, we will sue her until she does. Her mother knows that even if she wins the case, the compensation would be minimal. Based on Li Shui's personality, she might not even apologize and the people who scolded her will continue to scold her. But that isn't important. What's important is that the people who care about her know that there is still justice in this world. They protected the most important thing for the person they love. That person can finally rest in peace. It's strange that you hired a lawyer. Hoshino stuffed a hand into his pocket. It seems like Chin Mo has affected you quite a bit. Do you like him? At first, Hoshino assumed that the person on the other end would hesitate, even if it was just for a second. But she didn't. When she spoke, there wasn't a hint of hesitation. Yes, I like him a lot. I want to kidnap him and bring him back to the Fifth Avenue. Fortunately, I'm still rational and didn't carry out the plan. But I don't know if I can control myself in the future. She was so honest that he didn't know how to reply. Hoshino supported his forehead with his long and fair fingers, his lips lifting. In that moment, he didn't know how to reconcile his feelings. The person who had always been a loner finally had someone she liked. But that person wasn't him. Hoshino inhaled deeply. Don't torture us single dogs. But we won't be together. Hoshino didn't know how to reply to her next words. He's from the police and I'm an international criminal. In the movies, princes and princesses are always together. Which prince and evil dragon are together? The prince will only kill the evil dragon but the Almighty won't kill me. I'm so handsome, he won't want to see me or hide far away from me. It was worse than this. Bojio didn't tell Hoshino her last sentence. Instead, she changed the topic. Do you have a photo of that person? Hoshino knew who she was referring to even without Bojio's explanation. There are only some blurry ones. She is like her brother, never leaving behind any photos. But do you remember the address you gave me previously? It's an internet cafe beside Chin Mo's university. She should be staying nearby. She might even be staying in school. Bojio's eyes twitched. She rented a house outside but doesn't stay there. When she isn't on a mission, she stays in school. Even if she is on a mission, the school's network would be more convenient since the public IP isn't easy to locate. Hoshino caressed his phone. You think she's a student? 90%. Bojo glanced down at the lollipop in her right hand. If she's a student, it would be a useful disguise for her. Besides, the university isn't far from number 1 middle school, making it easier for her to locate her target and help her. More importantly, it's Chin Mo's school. You mentioned that if she wants to get him, the best way would be to become his schoolmate or join Supreme Alliance like I did. There are only 2 females in Supreme Alliance, me and Yao Yao. That eliminates the possibility of her being in Supreme Alliance. The only other possibility left is that she's his schoolmate. Hoshino retracted his gaze from the window. I understand what you mean. I'll focus on the investigation. Someone is coming, take care of yourself. I'm hanging up. Bojo hung up. She glanced at the phone screen. She resisted the urge to call Chin Mo. She continued to use the method to keep herself busy. But this time, while she was busy, Hoshino's words kept flashing through her mind. They had almost become lovers. Which meant that the Almighty knew her. But the Almighty seemed to have forgotten about it. How did that happen? What exactly happened back then? Since Hoshino hadn't been able to find anything, she could only hack into the data of some special forces, and since that person liked to impersonate her so much, she could only use her own methods to prove who was the real one. Now that she knew her target was the Almighty, she couldn't let that person continue to roam free. She had to settle this matter before she left. Even if the Almighty didn't want to talk to her anymore, the sun moved west. The black Land Rover didn't drive back to the Chin family's house. Instead, it stopped at a bar. The bar was near the school. Chin Mo didn't look at his injured back. He sat at the bar counter, tugged his tie, and ordered a row of drinks. The driver had already been sent away. Chin Mo didn't show much emotion even when he was drinking. But his elegant and handsome side profile was clearly much colder. He drank one glass after another, as though that was the only way his back wouldn't hurt so much. He thought that the guy must not have even noticed that he was injured. Because at that moment, she probably only had Hoshino in her eyes. Chin Mo laughed softly. His lips were slightly lifted, but there wasn't a hint of a smile. Instead, there was a sense of decadence and loneliness. Chapter 963. In the darkest corner of the bar, a girl came in after Chin Mo. She sat there and watched Chin Mo for a long time before breaking into a sweet smile. She walked towards Chin Mo with her beautiful eyes. Senior Chin, I didn't expect to meet you here. Chin Mo shifted his gaze away from the wine glass, sweeping her a glance. He didn't say a word. You should have forgotten my name. The last time I almost fell down the stairs, you were the one who supported me from behind. The girl tilted her head. She was wearing a skirt and had short hair. Her fingers were slender and looked like a cello player. She smiled at Chin Mo as though she wasn't bothered by his coldness. I'm Fan Jia, senior brother Chin, remember me this time. Chin Mo remained silent, pushing his glass over, gesturing for the bartender to continue. Fan Jia chuckled lightly. She stood at the side, her eyes bright and teeth white. Senior Chin, you don't look happy. Do you want to say it? It will make you feel better. In that instant, something surged in Chin Mo's mind. He looked at the girl and found her familiar. She had short hair and the same face shape as that fellow. But her eyes weren't like that fellow's. They were extremely dark and clear like water. He started to think about that fellow again. Little Fujio, who haunted him. That fellow who looked like a multiplication table. Chin Mo furrowed his brows. He was supposed to be impatient, but there was a hint of warmth in his eyes when he thought of someone. Senior Chin, what's wrong with your back? Are you injured? Fan Jia reached out. Chin Mo glanced over, his gaze icy. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with you. Fan Jia blushed but didn't get angry. I'm just worried about you. When Chin Mo heard this, he stood up, picked up his jacket and made a call. He didn't know who he was calling, but he said faintly, "I drank too much, come and pick me up." Lin Feng was baffled when he picked up the call. After all, he never thought that his captain would call him. It seemed like he really had too much to drink. Lin Feng's heart churned. He had witnessed the entire scene today. The unhappiness between his captain and Little Spade was obvious. Little Spade was really a withered spade. Between being punished by his captain and being a loyal brother, Lin Feng chose the latter and called Bojo. "Hello, Little Spade. Don't say I'm not loyal, there is a bright path for you to sleep with Captain again. It depends on your courage." Lin Feng crossed his legs as he spoke. "Captain is drunk. His coordinates are at the bar next to a university. He's getting someone to pick him up. Do you want to go?" Bojo didn't hesitate. Her reply made Lin Feng mutter, "Aren't you afraid of death? Only you would dare to target Captain. I'm near a university, it's convenient to head over. I'll take a cab now." She added, "In the future, if you wish to sleep with Almighty Yun, I'll help you." Lin Feng roared in his heart. "I'm a straight guy, I don't want to sleep with my own brothers." Unfortunately, the phone had already been hung up. Chapter 964. After Bojo hung up, she hopped into a cab. "Sir, the White Knight Bar near a university." At this hour, the traffic was starting to get congested. The cab wasn't going fast. She didn't understand why the Almighty would call Lin Feng, but only a naive person like Lin Feng would ask her to fetch the Almighty. When Bojo alighted, she was prepared for the Almighty's cold stare. After leaving the club, the Almighty went straight to the bar, clearly in a bad mood. He had been like this when he had been young. When he was unhappy, he would reject others. No matter how she tried to coax him, he wouldn't budge. What a troublesome little vixen. Back then, she had been thick-skinned. But from the looks of it, she wasn't that thick-skinned. Bojo glanced down at the time on her watch before walking briskly towards the bar. She bypassed the car parked in front of the door and saw a cold figure standing under the neon lights. It was a very noble and different person. Bojo prepared herself mentally. Basically, she was prepared to be rejected. She took another step forward. At this moment, she saw him clearly. The Almighty's battle uniform was half open, revealing the white t-shirt underneath. His short black hair and tall nose showed off his beautiful side profile. His facial features were clear, and his eyebrows were clear and his eyes were clear. He held a cigarette between his slender and fair fingers. Because he had drunk some alcohol, his fringe drooped down, reflecting his deep eyes, making him look even more wanton and unrestrained. The Almighty raised his eyes and glanced at her. It was obvious that he had already sensed her presence. Bojo could hear her heartbeat. She thought of many things she wanted to say, but when she saw the person behind the Almighty, she paused. It was a short-haired girl with a sweet appearance. She seemed to have been standing there for a while, a bright smile on her face. She seemed to be talking to the Almighty. She could vaguely hear the word senior. This was... Bojo paused. She wasn't sure how the girl had come. Was she drinking with the Almighty? Bojo couldn't be blamed for thinking that way. She had never seen anyone so close to the Almighty. Even though they hadn't had any physical contact, there was an indescribable feeling. But there was an indescribable feeling. It seemed like they knew each other. Based on her understanding of the Almighty, if he really hated someone, he would definitely ask the other party to leave. Did the Almighty come alone or did he have a date? Bojo wasn't sure if she should continue walking over. At this moment, the girl also raised her eyes. At first, she was surprised that Gu Shijiu would appear. Then, she smiled, revealing her dimples. Senior, that's Spade Z, right? He's even more handsome in real life. Chin Mo remained silent. Bojo suddenly felt that her presence was unnecessary. Her heart sank and she was about to turn. "How long do you want me to stand here alone?" he asked in a low and familiar voice. Bojo glanced up. She wasn't sure if he was talking to her. Besides, he didn't seem happy that she was here. The man stubbed out the cigarette in his hand and threw it into the dustbin. He pulled open his uniform jacket and walked towards her. She didn't even have the time to react before he walked towards her. Her vision darkened as someone covered her with a jacket. Bojo was about to move. But the voice beside her ears was still cold. "Don't move, I don't want to see you now." Bojo's fingers stilled. She didn't know what to do. As expected, it wasn't a good feeling to be hated by the Almighty. She was so handsome that even the Almighty didn't want to see her face. In the future, she wouldn't be able to use this face to win any benefits. Since when did her face become a minus factor? Bojo took a moment. It was too difficult for her to stay still. Just as she was about to take a step, she saw the person walking towards her from under the jacket. Before she could do anything, she felt herself being picked up by someone. Didn't he not want to see her? "Why, Brother Mo." He ignored her, but she could feel his familiar peppermint tobacco scent lingering at the tip of her nose. Bojo didn't move. The tip of her nose touched Chin Mo's chest through the jacket. She couldn't see anything as he carried her. Her fingers tightened on the jacket, her heart racing. She didn't understand what the Almighty meant. Was he really going to throw her into the dustbin? After all, the Almighty had been looking at her with disdain, as though he wanted to get rid of her. Speaking of which, why wasn't the Almighty surprised that she was the one who came to fetch him and not the naive Lin Feng? Just as Bojo was thinking about it, she felt herself being placed on the seat of a car. It was probably the Land Rover she was familiar with. Because of the surrounding environment, even if she couldn't see it in front of her, she knew that the furnishings around her were familiar to her. Just as she was about to say something, her chin was lifted. After the jacket was slightly lifted, a cold kiss came in. Bojo's pupils wavered. Her lips were pried open. All she could feel was the aroma of the wine pouring in, and the tipsy feeling made her lose all her thoughts at that moment. The tip of their tongues touched, bringing with it a scent that she hadn't felt for a long time. Bojo could only lean against the seat, unaware of the situation around her. Half her face was covered by the jacket and she was in a sorry state from the kiss. The Land Rover was parked in the parking lot marked out by the bar. There were many people passing by. Chin Mo was wearing a white t-shirt, bending over and kissing. Who knew how many people stopped in their direction? That kind of scene seemed to only appear in comics. But no matter how curious they were, they didn't know what the youngster looked like. How exactly did he think of such a way of kissing? They could vaguely see the figure but not the face. But just by looking at the figure, they were definitely good-looking, especially Chin Mo's long legs and waist. His half-bent waist exuded an innate aura. Even his kiss was domineering. Those who whistled and those who tossed and turned did it. Chin Mo acted as though there was no one else around, kissing her until she was exhausted. After a while, he released her and pinched her chin again. He bit her lips, continuing to taste the sweetness that she didn't want to let go of. Bojo didn't know what was going on around her, allowing Chin Mo to kiss her. Gradually, she lost all her strength. The sounds seemed to have weakened. No matter how loud they were, they became the background in her ears. It was as though there was such a person in this world. When he kissed you, you could only hear your own heartbeat. Everyone saw the kissing scene. Fan Jia, who was standing not far away, saw the entire scene. Her fingers tightened, and when it reached a certain level, her eyes overflowed with venom. She really didn't expect that after planning for such a long time, a chance to drink alone with him, it would be gone just like that. And why was Chin Mo still in such a state after Spade Z saved Hoshino? She had received news that the two of them were in a cold war. And why was he starting to like boys? That person clearly liked girls. She had always thought it was because of the novelty. The novelty was the excitement that the youngster brought him. Because in the esports scene, he probably hadn't met such a person. The FC King of Zone C, it was hard not to notice this title. She had seen young Master Fu play before, it was no wonder he was interested. Fan Jia had always known that other than Z, Qin Mo was most interested in esports. In the past, she had tried to get close to him, but it hadn't been effective. This young master of the Fu family had only occupied that position because he had appeared in the most vacant period of his life. He was really lucky. Fan Jia stood there, her gaze deepening. Watching him kiss someone made her want to kill the person he was kissing. It seemed like she hadn't been forceful enough. Fan Jia's gaze deepened, but she didn't show any emotions. It was time to find an alliance. Fu Zhongyi was the best candidate. Amidst the envious whistles, Fang Jia disappeared into the night. She believed that as long as she continued to lay low, she would be able to obtain that person completely. She would let young Master Fu have him for a few days, she would snatch him back. Because she knew better than anyone what could attract his interest, in the Land Rover. Bo Jiao sat there, watching the pair of eyes that were as beautiful as the stars, panting softly. She didn't know how she had offended the Almighty. His coat covered him again, and his whole body was covered. Through the jacket, the Almighty's lips pressed against her, the fragrance of sandalwood lingering in her bones. His voice was still cold. Who asked you to appear? He didn't want her to show her face. Bo Jiao wanted to lift her lids, but her head was already pressed into his embrace. Then she heard the Almighty on the phone. Drive over. There was a driver? Then why did he get Lin Feng to fetch him? It seemed like the Almighty had drunk too much. Bo Jiao arched a brow, feeling as though the Almighty was looking in her direction. But she couldn't tell what he was thinking. Actually, his thoughts were simple. The moment he saw that person's face, he would lose his principles. Hence, he didn't want to see it. But because of that person in his arms, many feelings changed. The pressure on his chest disappeared without a trace. Even if he didn't see it, he could imagine her gloomy expression. He would leave her alone. That way, he wouldn't be able to see through her thoughts. Qin Mo's gaze deepened at the thought of her instinctive protection. After all, she was the most obedient when she was gloomy. Bo Jiao couldn't see any of this, which was indeed gloomy. She couldn't see anything. She tilted her head and heard the sound of the car. After walking for a while, she asked, Brother Mo, when can I show my face? Chapter 965. But Bo Jiao knew it was a light punishment. She sat there for a while. When she felt it was enough, she tried to suggest, Brother Mo, I think you'll feel better when you see my face. I'm so handsome, I can beautify the air. I don't need you to beautify the air. His voice was slow, his fingers touching her lips through the jacket. You better be quiet, I don't want to see your face or hear your words, understand? Understood, who couldn't be its under a little fairy? Bo Jiao nodded, not saying it out loud. She knew the Almighty didn't want to reconcile with her this time. The driver glanced at the rearview mirror more than once. Boss Qin could just ask someone to leave if he didn't want to see them. Why did he have to cover his face? He turned and planted a kiss on the top of her head. He didn't understand the boss's world. Perhaps no one could understand. He liked someone too much and was a proud person. If it had been someone else, he would have ignored them. But this fellow, he forced himself not to think about it but used Lin Feng to make her appear. Yes, Qin Mo's phone call wasn't something he would make when he was drunk. As the captain of the Supreme Alliance, he knew every member's personality. When that naive Lin Feng received the call, his first reaction would definitely be to inform this fellow. Qin Mo glanced down at the youngster in his arms. He was still thinking about what he should do with her. Since he couldn't think of anything, he decided to bring her home. The Land Rover entered the military courtyard. Bo Jiao's hearing was sensitive, she could hear the sound of the gun. The car stopped. Chin Mo carried the person he had covered with his jacket down and placed her on the bed. Bojo took a moment. The moment she reached her hand out, her lips were kissed again. This time, the kiss was deeper. When her head sank into the pillow, her breathing became erratic. Our relationship isn't just in bed, understand? That hoarse voice, accompanied by his breath, landed on her lips. It was still a little cold. You have to take responsibility for provoking me. Bojo muttered, I've always been responsible. Your responsibility is to save Hoshino. Chin Mo's voice was calm. Bojo didn't know how to reply. Chin Mo glanced at her, released her, and stood up. Bojo knew this was the end. She couldn't make up any more stories. Chin Mo's back was facing her as he replied, forget it. Bojo's fingers froze. She wanted to say something but it wasn't possible. There was the sound of the door closing. It was obvious that he wanted to chase the guest away. Even though she knew that, she didn't want to move. He maintained this position for a while. It was as if it was absorbing the last bit of sunlight. The night outside began to turn dark. Chin Mo sat in the study room that was just a wall away from his bedroom. Listening to the commotion, he tilted his head and lit a cigarette. He held the silver cigarette lighter in his hand, and when he flipped it over, he saw that it was a USB flash drive. If not for Lin Feng's call. She probably didn't even think to ask where he was. Things that were forced would always be very painful to prick. Even the gifts were the same. There was a moment of silence. Chin Mo knew she was about to leave. He smoked a cigarette, as if that was the only way to suppress the boredom. Just as he turned his head, the study room door was pried open. The person who pried open the door stood there. I'll leave after I help you apply the ointment. Chin Mo extinguished the cigarette, his voice calm. Someone will be here in a while. Her only excuse to stay was gone. Bojo finally understood that the Almighty didn't want to see her. They had never been so polite with each other. Until a sound from downstairs broke the silence. Movie Queenan was back. She walked over when she saw the light in the study room. With just one look, she could see the problem between them. Just as Bojo was about to leave, he grabbed her. Jo, since you're here, I have something to ask for your opinion. Don't leave today, let's have a good talk. Bojo glanced at Chin Mo, replying, all right. Chin Mo's clenched fists loosened as the word left his lips. Since they were going to stay, they definitely had to eat dinner. Movie Queenan had already decided to arrange for them to sit together. But that was all in the future. Movie Queenan was smart. She never asked the children what had happened. She did have something to look for Bojo. I have a movie, the director has asked me twice to be his lobbyist. Movie Queenan added a piece of bacon. I think the role is suitable for you. Why don't you take on the role and I'll tell you about the weakness of my cold son. Bojo never knew how to reject someone like Movie Queenan. I have to wait until after the competition, but I'm not sure what the situation will be. Besides, I don't know how to act. Once the competition ended, she would find an opportunity to leave. It doesn't matter. Movie Queenan reached out to pinch the youngster's face. You don't have to act, the director said. You can just sit in front of the computer and play games. You can appear as yourself. That's all, just treat it as a favor. Since Movie Queenan said that, Bojo couldn't reject her. The director is looking for an esports player? No, it's a hacker. Movie Queenan was delighted. In the movie, it's my son. I've always wanted a handsome and caring son like Joe. Your brother Mo is too cold, not cute at all. It wasn't easy to reply. Bojo lowered her head and ate the rice in her bowl. She couldn't help glancing at the empty seat beside her. Deep down, she knew why the Almighty hadn't come down to eat. It was because of her. You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.